I would bet that is Ricky Smith over at BWI Marshall Airport.
That would be me.
That's my theme music.
Me. I am about 5 minutes from BWI.
Great.
I would bet that is Ricky Smith over at BWI Marshall Airport.
That's my theme music.
All right. All right. It looks like we're good to go. Yep. Jim, are you there?
Go ahead and count down.
All right. We're good to go. In 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our first virtual Consolidated Transportation Program, road and rail show, I'll call it. First of all, just, protocol, we're doing this on Zoom, so please mute when you're not speaking. And we're also streaming the meeting on YouTube. We have a full agenda tonight. So first of all, thank you to Secretary Slater and his whole team for doing this as they do every year, although this is Secretary Slater's first one as secretary in Montgomery County. So welcome to you. And also a big thanks to, on our team, Michelle Purcell, who has handled all the logistics. And this is actually her swan song as our delegation aide. As many of you know, Michelle is moving on, or moving back, I should say, to the Department of Legislative Services. But Michelle, I just want to publicly thank you for all you've done for me, for the delegation, and really everybody. It's just been a tremendous help the past 10 months. So.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity.
So just to briefly go over the agenda, first we'll hear from Secretary Slater, and we'll let him work through his team and do their presentation up front. Then Chair Zucker and I will go through the different speakers we have this evening. We'll start with the county, and then we'll, hey bud, would you mind stepping up for 1 second? Sorry, everybody. We'll go from there to the county and municipal governments, and then we'll go through the state delegations district by district and ask questions. Let me just say up front, Mr. Secretary, that obviously there are a lot of big issues that we're looking forward to hearing you address. We appreciate that you're dealing with a very difficult budget situation that was really beyond anybody's immediate control. Obviously, there's a very big and frankly controversial P3 road project that is continuing to be advanced in Montgomery County and other places that we're going to want to hear about. And obviously the situation with the Purple Line, which, as you know, is a top priority for the county, seeing that completed. And then there'll be, all the usual things from the Transportation Priorities Letter, and then our district by district projects. I just want to thank you for Andre Futrell, who's been a terrific district engineer and responsive to many folks in the community. And we appreciate the work Erica Rigby's been doing as he's moved up to another job in your office. But we really welcome the open engagement that you've brought to this position. So with that, let me turn it over to Chair Zucker for any opening comments.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Corman. Mr. Secretary, we want to thank you and your team for being here. This is obviously having you engaged here is important to not only the Montgomery County House and Senate delegation, but the county and local officials that are on as well. Wanted to salute Michelle and thank you for all of your help. And with that, let's get the show on the road, or at least on the Zoom. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Chairman Corman, and you can introduce the Secretary and we can get going.
I'll just hand it right over to the Transportation Secretary of the State of Maryland, Secretary Greg Slater.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Good evening, chairs, Senator Zucker and Delegate Corman. It's great to be here. For the record, my name is Greg Slater, Secretary, Maryland Department of Transportation. I'm going to focus the bulk of my remarks focused on kind of the budget and the numbers and the CTP so that we can get right into some of the questions after we hear a few of the details from some of our administrators. But I want to thank you for inviting us here today to provide an overview of our draft 6-year CTP. This is covering fiscal years 21 to 26. As Delegate Corman had noted, in an effort to practice social distancing, protect you, the residents of your county, and our team, we're holding these CTPs tours virtually for the first time this year. But you can follow along at ctp.maryland.gov to view the current CTP if that is helpful. Let me introduce a little bit of the team that's here with me this evening. From the State Highway Administration, I have relatively newly appointed Administrator Tim Smith and our District Engineer Erica Rigby. From the Transportation Authority, we have Executive Director Jim Ports. From the Maryland Transit Administration, we have Administrator Kevin Quinn, as well as our Purple Line Executive Director Matt Pollack. From the Motor Vehicle Administration, we have Administrator Chrissy Nizer. And from the Maryland Aviation Administration, we have Executive Director Ricky Smith, Planning and Engineering Chief Paul Schenk, and our Regional Aviation Assistance Director Ashish Solanki. Also from the Secretary's Office, we have Carrie Snyder, our Regional Planner, our Director of Government Affairs, Jeff Tozy, and our State Legislative Officer, Pilar Helm. Just jumping right into the CTP, I did my first CTP tour meeting as an SHA Planning Director in 2008. So I have a lot of history on these meetings. I've been to them over the course of many years. We've collaborated on a lot of projects together. We fought for some together. We've gotten a lot done together. But tonight, I am humbled to be addressing you for the first time as Secretary in what I will say are these historically challenging times, trying to keep our network moving, our people we serve safe, our teams safe, and the economic crisis that is coming with it. I do want to take a pause and congratulate Montgomery County on yesterday's start of their new bus rapid transit service along US 29. I regret I wasn't able to be there personally for the official launch, but I was happy to support with a video, some well wishes. But that service is a great example of collaboration between the county and the state and our federal partners. I worked on that in the early phases as the planning director, and I'm really proud of the role that we played because that service is going to be vital to our citizens. Jumping right into the CTP, this draft CTP is a challenging, and it's a direct result of some of the drastic reductions in travel. Let me start walking you through some of the travel numbers and budget numbers that we're seeing here. If we look at comparing 2020 to the same week in 2019, the same week of travel, that was the second week of April was kind of our peak at the stay-at-home order. Our highway traffic volumes were down 52%. Right now, they're down 14%. Our truck volumes were down about 27, and they're down about 17 now. Our passenger traffic at BWI Marshall Airport was down 95%, now 65%, somewhat hovering. Our transit service was down about 70% with varying rates in the different services, but is now down about 50%. Our Port of Baltimore really never went down too much. At the peak, we were down 17%, and we're actually up now in September and up in October. So we've accomplished a lot, but the impact of the budget remains, and we're starting to recover. If you look at our 6-year CTP, the trust fund revenue declines across the board were from the motor fuel tax, about $636 million, titling tax, about $190 million, as well as some impacts to our corporate income tax.
Hello. Just fine. I'm actually watching.
Council President, if you wouldn't mind muting yourself, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
As well as some varying impacts on the corporate income tax, MTA, and MAA operating revenues. But what this really means over the course of a 6-year program is about a $1.4 billion decline in revenue and a decrease of bond sales of about $1.5 billion for a $2.9 billion reduction in the CTP compared to the one that we introduced last year. The changes, the project cash flows and completions have changed. And so, we're working through this, but this draft CTP today is a $13.4 billion budget and reflects some pretty tough decisions. Every department across every mode across the department took a hit on the 6-year capital budget in its capital and operating budget. The Secretary's office budget was reduced about $23 million and about 5% of the operating budget. The Secretary's capital budget is primarily grant programs, those types of things. Over at SHA, SHA took a $900 million cut in capital and a 7% reduction in its operating budget. MTA had a $150 million reduction in its capital program and 5% of its operating budget. MAA had a $522 million reduction in its capital budget, although Executive Director Ricky Smith is going to talk a little bit about that. The bulk of that will come back with some revenue bonds as the market returns, and about 8% of its operating budget. Over at the Port of Baltimore, the Port Administration took about a $227 million hit to its capital program and 6% of its operating budget, and a $25 million reduction at the Motor Vehicle Administration and 4% of its operating budget. But every single cut weighed heavily on us. But the reality is you can't make these kind of cuts without feeling it. So, where we think you're going to start to feel some of these things with what you see and feel out on our roadway system and our transit systems. What you're going to feel are a little bit less road maintenance, grass cutting, those types of things is going to be a little bit measured, and we're going to focus on the safety side. We're going to have an impact to our facilities. Our system preservation programs are very much underfunded right now, and we have an impact to our LOTS program, our locally operated transit system, our grant program across the board. But what I'll leave you with is earlier this year when I came in as secretary, I laid out some key priorities and some focus areas for us. First and foremost is prioritizing state of good repair and system preservation and focusing on kind of building the intelligence into our system. I wanted us to focus on delivering some of those key infrastructure projects like the Purple Line, a very nice bridge down in Southern Maryland. But I do want to take a moment and address a little bit of the Purple Line, and then we'll get into that more with some of the questioning as well. But I just want to reiterate a commitment from us very publicly, and I know a commitment that the governor has made publicly that we remain committed to delivering the Purple Line. And I can tell you that I am personally working on it every single day. And so we are continuing to progress there. But as well as providing a safe and accessible mobility choices for all of our users, including our pedestrians, our bicyclists, and looking at when we develop projects, the interplay between land use and transportation, and making sure that this department is open, transparent, customer focused, and a vision that incorporates roadway, transit, freight, air, and port infrastructure. But if you look at the program, what you'll see is a little bit of a breakdown. Our service modes are receiving about 1.4%. So our service modes, the Motor Vehicle Administration, as well as the Secretary's office, has about 1.4% of the total capital budget and about 14% of the operating budget. Our economic engines, like the Port of Baltimore and BWI Marshall Airport, are looking at about 9.5% of our capital budget, 11% of our operating budget. Over on the transit side, between MTA and WMATA, they're receiving about 39.2% of the capital budget in this program and about 61% of the total operating budget, with MTA alone accounting for about 41% of our operating budget. Our state highways are receiving about 39.6% of the capital budget and about 13% of the operating budget, while our local jurisdictions are getting about 10% of the capital budget through the highway user revenue grants. We were able to preserve a couple of key projects in this program. Our light rail vehicle overhaul and our new Metro cars for MTA, our phase 2 of Customer Connect and the Howard Street Tunnel are some great examples. But the Howard Street Tunnel is really great for us in terms of partnering with our public-private partnership with Ports America Chesapeake and building on that kind of growing container business at the port. But the port is just one example of transportation and how important it is. And we have been working hard through this pandemic about working, make sure our systems are out there, our folks are out there helping on the roadways, as well as MBA certifying commercial drivers and providing access to job centers. But it's tough. While we are doing our best we can with the funding the state does have, we can't do it alone. So we're continuing to work with our federal delegation to advocate for additional support. That first wave of the CARES Act was critical for us. And I can tell you that we're having a regular dialogue, and our federal delegation is doing a great job advocating for us as a state as those things start to advance. But in closing, before I turn it over to some of our administrators, I just want to announce on a couple of our key projects through our Bikeways program. So we have MDOT has a Kim Lamphere's Bikeways Network program. It's a program that we're really proud of. If you didn't know Kim, who the program is dedicated after, Kim was a resident of Baltimore County, but she grew up in Montgomery County, and she always talked about riding on Rock Creek. But we're really honored to have that program named after her. In that program this year, we have a $17,000 grant for Cheltenham Drive to Pearl Street, a bikeway improvement feasibility study to complete the Bethesda Loop. And we have about a $30,000 grant for the first phase of the program to purchase and install 3 automated bike counters. So that's a really important part as we're working through our bicycle pedestrian priority areas and understanding some of those counts. We are going to be highlighting a lot of those projects and programs in our Walk Cycle Maryland Twitter and Facebook pages. So I'm trying really hard to kind of cut short today, and I will pause at this point and turn it over to Administrator Tim Smith talk about some of the state highway items. And then at the end, I will be back and we will all be here to answer any questions you may have about our program or any project efforts that we certainly have.
Thank you, Greg. Good evening, Delegate Corman, Senator Zucker, County Executive, and County Council members. As Secretary said, I'm Tim Smith. It's an honor to be here and a privilege to lead the State Highway team. I really feel like the challenges we faced so far in 2020 have allowed MDOT and State Highway to kind of highlight our ingenuity and perseverance. So MDOT made progress on important projects both in the field and virtually because we continued working throughout the entire year. A big part of our success is the caliber of our staff. I know Montgomery County is in really good hands with our local team there in District 3, led by Eric Rigby now, and previously Andre Futrell. During the pandemic, our primary goal was keeping our customers and our employees safe while still delivering on core functions. So we advanced projects while practicing physical distancing, following proper health practices, meeting virtually, and we switched to staggered shifts and alternated start times to reduce the number of staff we had at one location at any given time. As the Secretary mentioned, the statewide budget adjustments were impactful and obviously affected State Highway. We stay committed to continuing with our construction activities and keeping our roadways safe. So that's resulted in some projects in the planning and design phases being delayed to later years as we concentrated our available operational resources on safety. That has resulted in fewer mowing cycles, as the Secretary mentioned, and less litter pickup. And we've been feeling that and hearing that from our customers. But the good part about supporting our active construction program earlier this year is we were able to deliver some great projects, and some of them right here in Montgomery County. One is completing the eagerly awaited $124 million I-270 interchange at Watkins Mill just this past summer, thanks in part to the county's $4.9 million contribution. Are we also able to continue and advance innovative congestion management improvements along I-270 to help improve mobility in the short term? We've implemented new and innovative treatments to improve both bicyclist and pedestrian safety throughout the county. So this summer, we converted travel lanes in each direction to a buffered bicycle lane along Old Georgetown Road between Cedar Lane and 495. I really want to thank the elected officials in the community for their input, which was instrumental in making sure that important enhancement project got done. To touch on safety for just a minute, I would be remiss if I didn't mention work zone safety and Maryland's move over laws. We continue to have significant challenges with drivers not adhering to the law on our roadways. We've had our equipment, even members of our own team and our contractor partners hit while assisting disabled motorists performing construction and maintenance activities. We're currently partnering with the Maryland State Police to encourage safer truck speeds on the Capitol Beltway, especially there near the 270 interchange. I'm just requesting your support to kind of help us with education as well as the laws to protect our workers so they can return home safely each night and we can continue to deliver great projects. So in closing, I wanted to highlight our emphasis on accessibility as we develop projects in the future. Accessibility has a huge safety component to it, but it's more about consideration of all users to our system. So one way we change the way we do business is by identifying proactive treatments that support safe access and mobility for pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists. The context guide, which I hope most of you are aware of, is changing the way we deliver projects, and a Vision Zero philosophy will aid in making our roadways safer for everyone. For example, over the last 18 months, we've reduced speed limits, installed continental crosswalks, implemented some no turn on reds, and adjusted signals to incorporate lead pedestrian intervals in almost 100 different locations in the county, including 10 state corridors recommended for improvement in Montgomery County in your 2-year Vision Zero action plan. So thank you for your time. And now I'll introduce my MDOT teammate with the Transportation Authority, Jim Ports.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate that. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yes.
So, just like Secretary Slater said and Tim said, the MDOT team never stopped working, and as well as MDTA maintained operations, and we actually advanced a lot of projects a little quicker than we had hoped and quicker than we thought because of our great employees. So one of the things we did was we completed the Bay Bridge project and advanced other initiatives during COVID-19 with reduced revenue. We changed some of our operations and delayed some of our work. And we also did all electronic cashless tolling statewide since March 17th to limit contact of the traveling public as well as our employees. After closing in March, we reopened Easy Pass customer service centers on June 15th with limited capacity and safety precautions in place. And key MDTA accomplishments during COVID-19, we completed the work to reopen the Bay Bridge westbound right lane, install new tolling gantry, and deliver full-time all-electronic tolling in advance of the summer goal. We also advanced other projects such as I-895 project in Baltimore and the new nice Middleton Bridge in Southern Maryland. We're also working to develop our Drive Easy MD toll modernization, new payment options, pay by plate, and early payment notice, a toll due discount. And we expect to open that new website and go live in the first quarter of next year. We also reduced the civil penalty from $50 to $25 for toll violations, and additional features such as new vehicle toll classifications with lower toll rates will roll out in phases once the new tolling system goes live. I mentioned the nice Middleton Bridge. Just to give you an update, we kicked off the major construction in July. It's going to have a new wider 4-lane crossing. Will be open to traffic, we believe, in early 2023. The facility is now permanently cashless, like all MDTA facilities at highway speed. AET with toll booth removal will be completed during this project. We also had the Bay Crossing Tier 1 NEPA study. We anticipate publishing Tier 1 draft environmental impact statement and identifying MDTA's recommended preferred corridor alternative in the fall of 2020 and holding public hearings in early 2021. Tier 1 final environmental impact statement record of decision is scheduled for 2021. And if you want to look up any other further information, you can visit baycrossingstudy.com. Bay Bridge ongoing work, westbound deck rehabilitation in the center and left lanes. And we're working on the Bay Bridge crossover automated lane closure system, which should help traffic, especially on contraflow and heavy traffic days. With that, I thank you very much, and I'll now turn it over to Kevin Quinn at MTA.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, great, always good. Always good to check ahead of time. So good evening, everyone. Appreciate you having us tonight. As you know, MDOT MTA is one of the largest multimodal transit systems in the United States. We operate local bus, metro, light rail, and paratransit in the Baltimore region, and commuter bus and MARC trains statewide, and as well as supporting locally operated transit systems like Montgomery County Ride On, one of our fantastic operating transit systems in the state. As it's been noted, COVID-19 really resulted in a major decline of Marylanders' use of transportation services across the state, and we began on the transit side, really seeing dramatic decreases in ridership starting in mid-March that resulted in decreases in our fare revenues. MARC, at the height of it all, MARC service was down about 97%. It's now down about 89%. Commuter bus was down 95%. That's now about 86%. But our core local bus service in Baltimore at one point was down 61%. It's now down about 46%. On September 29th, we did announce that commuter bus and MARC service will begin operating on reduced schedules starting on November 2nd. And when you really take a look at 2019 compared to 2020, what we've really seen is that the average commuter bus daily boardings are down from 14,000 riders in August down to 1,700. The average commuter bus trip to the Washington area has decreased from an average of 24 riders down to 2. And so our MARC boardings similarly have decreased from 35,000 down to 3,000. Some pretty staggering numbers. So we did announce that commuter bus and MARC will begin operating on those reduced schedules starting on November 2nd. And we look at these as very temporary reductions that will allow us to preserve those MARC train slots with CSX and Amtrak and our contracts with our commuter bus providers, but will also allow us to respond nimbly as Maryland's economy recovers. We were able to also have some really key accomplishments during COVID-19. In August, we launched real-time tracking for our MARC train service. which is also used for commuter bus and for real-time tracking. So you now have on a single app able to track MARC trains, the commuter bus and local buses up in Baltimore. And our MARC website has also been redeveloped to have that same information. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, Montgomery County is also receiving $30 million in federal CARES Act funds to support operations and capital needs of Ride-On, which I think is just fantastic. As you probably know, due to the sharp decline in transit revenues, state matching funds for local transit projects aren't available in this year's CTP, but we're certainly going to be coordinating closely with local operators across the state to discuss the availability of local matching funds to apply the CARES Act funds and available federal funding to support those critical local transit needs that we know you have. We were able to preserve some projects as well, keeping investments in fleet modernization. For example, one of those is an investment of $54 million to overhaul 63 Mark III rail cars. So that's advancing, and 7 of those are actually currently in service. Some other key initiatives: we are undertaking a 50-year statewide transit plan. I'm really looking forward to working with Montgomery County and other stakeholders across the state to really develop this long-term vision for planning and transit and framework for coordinated transit service across the state of Maryland. I do want to take a few minutes and give a Purple Line update. So on Tuesday, September 28th, MDOT MTA officially took over the day-to-day management of moving the Purple Line construction forward and delivering this critical transit project as quickly as possible for the citizens of Maryland. And to that end, MTA has assumed the Purple Line's key contracts and hundreds of subcontracts to continue the delivery of the Purple Line. So some of these contracts include the light rail car manufacturing contract with CAF, the operations and maintenance contract, 233 design and construction contracts and related subcontracts and purchase orders, as well as 6 commercial leases and licenses. So with those contracts in hand, our Purple Line Executive Director, Matt Pollock, led the first virtual meeting with the assumed subcontractors on September 30th to outline the next steps as work progresses. And over the next 30 days, we'll be working together to continue mobilizing the maintenance of traffic and erosion sediment control all along the corridor, relocating overhead electric and underground utilities throughout Prince George's and Montgomery County, installing a permanent utility supply to the Glen Ridge Operations and Maintenance Facility, continuing to manufacture those light rail vehicles factory up in New York, manufacturing other key components of the Purple Line project, such as traffic signal poles, electrical components, and special track work, as well as completing final construction designs for stormwater management and intelligent transportation systems across the alignment. So this work is in addition to the ongoing MTA Purple Line project work that was being done sort of in-house, separate from the PLTP-led efforts, such as the Polk Street Maintenance Facility, the Kengar Wetlands Restoration, the Paint Branch Stream Restoration, and the WSSC 66-inch waterline relocation design. And as we really look to evaluate these subcontracts over the next few weeks, we're going to do our best to maintain the work that we recognize is most impactful to communities. Many elected officials, many of you have reached out to me. I've reached out to Secretary Slater with your priorities, and we're going to continue to listen and work with you and work with our partners. Once our team's really done this full evaluation, we'll be communicating the work that is and isn't going forward through additional briefings and also through the CAT presentations and CAT meetings that we'll be scheduling shortly. You know, the Transportation Trust Fund provides a flexible funding tool that really allows us to keep the project moving in the short term without impacting other projects. And those long-term funding options are still under development. And so while I don't sit here today with a specific timeline for a completion of the project, I want to reiterate the Secretary's commitment to getting the Purple Line project done as quickly as possible for the residents of Montgomery County. So thank you again for having us. I'll now turn it over to Chrissy Nizer at MBA. Chrissy.
Thank you, Kevin, and it's certainly a pleasure to be with you all tonight. At MDOT MBA, we remain focused on providing premier customer service even during this challenging time. Our branch offices obviously had to shut down for several months, but we did have many of our employees who were still hard at work processing those online transactions as well as mail-in work. During the COVID emergency period when we were shut down, our employees actually processed more than 740,000 transactions, which is quite remarkable. We're also proud of the work we did with the Department of Health and local health departments to establish some of our VEEP stations, including in Montgomery County as a COVID testing site. When we did reopen our branch offices on June 8th, those were by appointment only and a reduced capacity. And you'll also notice several other changes if you come to visit us. We are taking a temperature screening, asking several health questions before you enter the facility, social distancing stickers throughout, as well as plexiglass installed in all of our customer-facing areas. We've also made some programmatic changes to our driving test that'll be conducted with the instructor outside the vehicle. They'll be grading the test from there, and that obviously is to keep that social distance with the applicant. Also, driver education, the classroom portion is now done online. So we're really focused on all the things that we can do to keep our customers and our employees safe. To that end, we've deployed a lot of new online services, so I'd encourage you and your constituents to check those out first before they think about making that appointment. It's a convenient and safe way to still complete MBA business. We're proud of our deployment of Customer Connect in early July. That's our new vehicle system. It also includes business services as well as motor carrier services. Again, that'll help us be able to even do more things for customers online and make it more convenient for them. Earlier this week, we also announced that those vehicle emission services I just talked about are now transitioning back to MBA testing for vehicle emissions. So that'll be effective Monday, October 19th. I also wanted to mention that the Glenmont branch office in Montgomery County will actually be moving to the Kemp Mill Shopping Center, and that'll happen in January of 2021. So obviously we'll keep you updated on that and give you specific dates as we get closer to it, but it'll give us more capacity. We will be able to do learner's permits there now and have a few additional stations. Despite the budget challenges everybody's talked about, we're excited to still be moving forward with phase 2 of Customer Connect. That'll be in December of 2021 and include all of our driver services. We're also still moving forward with Real ID, but we're glad the federal government moved that deadline back a year to October 1 of 2020. The good news is Maryland is over 70% compliant. That compares with a federal rate that was just announced by USDHS of 38%. So we're doing really well with Real ID. We also remain focused on highway safety and reducing fatalities on our roadways. Recently, it was announced that more than $250,000 in highway safety grants were awarded to Montgomery County. We also launched a new campaign called Be the Driver, and it's all focused on what each of us can do to reduce crashes on our roadways. We're busy at work on the next version of our highway safety plan, which will take us from 2021 through 2025. That is focus on the fundamental Vision Zero goal that our state has to reach zero fatalities by 2023. And I just want to continue to applaud Montgomery County for your leadership in this. We've been talking about the development of those local plans, and Montgomery County is clearly a leader in developing your local Vision Zero plan. And I truly believe that that makes a difference. And I want to applaud your efforts in that way. We're committed to working with you to try to find the best solutions in everything we do. And certainly we could not do that without our employees. I'm so proud of the great work that they've done throughout this entire period. And I'd be remiss without mentioning that we've tragically lost one of our employees this week. It's really been a hard week for our employees. Our thoughts and prayers certainly go out to the family members, as well as the friends and colleagues. We remain committed to working with the Department of Health to do everything we can to keep our employees as well as our customers safe, and we will continue to do that. So thank you for your time. And at this point, I'll now turn it over to Ricky Smith. Ricky.
Okay. Good evening, delegation and members, representatives of the county government. It's my pleasure this evening to be able to talk to you and provide an update on matters related to BWI Marshall, Martin State Airport, as well as regional aviation assistance. Like airports across the nation, BWI Marshall Airport has seen reduced passenger and airline activity since early spring. At the height or the bottom, depending on how you look at it, of this pandemic, BWI traffic plummeted to 97%, by 97%. But we did see some airline and passenger traffic return over the summer. Traffic is now hovering around 67% reduction. For July, BWI Marshall passenger traffic was 51% of the entire Washington area market. For the second straight month, the total at BWI Marshall was more than Reagan National and Dulles combined. At the same time, BWI Marshall has continued to see increasing cargo activity, which has been a bright spot during this whole pandemic at BWI. The aviation industry expects at least a 2 to 3 year period before we regain pre-COVID level traffic activities. Although BWI Marshall remains well positioned for when the industry begins its true recovery, we continue to take steps to navigate the current challenges. Moving on to some accomplishments, I must take this opportunity to acknowledge the members of our team and our partners for working so hard throughout the pandemic to maintain critical operations on behalf of our customers. I've never been prouder of an airport team as I am of both the MAA team as well as the partners in our ecosystem throughout the airport. They've shown enormous courage and resilience to continue to provide service to our customers and their co-workers. The airport system never closed, and so we continued to provide much needed service to airport users. We acted swiftly in the spring to provide rent relief to airlines and concessions in order to maintain customer amenities and jobs. Currently, about 53% of our food and retail concessions are open to serve the traveler. That's an improvement from 80% of our services being down. The Federal CARES Act allocated $87 million to help fund BWI Marshall and Martin State Airport operations, helping to offset revenue loss. Moving on to the CTP, the draft CTP reflects a temporary pause on some major work for BWI Marshall, primarily related to the expansive Concourse AB connector and baggage handling system project. This project will largely be funded by airport revenue bonds, as Secretary Slater alluded to earlier. The work with these bonds is paused until the market for these bonds has stabilized. Moving on to some projects that we were able to preserve. A number of these projects are focused on safety, and they are reflected in the current draft CTP. These projects include important work on near-term needs, as I stated, particularly related to safety. MA will continue to support and foster aviation across Maryland by working with our 35 public use airports in the state. For fiscal year 2021, MAA intends to provide $2.35 million in state support for regional airports across the state. And I want to acknowledge and thank Secretary Slater for this continued commitment to our regional aviation system. These funds come directly from the Secretary's budget. So thank you, Secretary Slater. Davis Airport in Laytonsville will receive $117,000 in state aviation grant assistance for land acquisition to support extension of its runway. This is a much needed, long awaited service for this airport. There are several airfield projects at BWI that will move forward, including a major reconstruction of Taxiway T, which is a primary aircraft circulation route around the terminal. This project will be fully funded by federal government with more than $11 million in CARES Act funds. The 5-gate extension of Concourse A is nearing completion. Our work is basically done. However, the work of 3 food and retail concessions are continuing to build out their operations. We continue to work with the FAA on the extensive environmental assessment process for the next phase of improvements at BWI Marshall and Martin State Airports. We're finalizing the design process for a major terminal restroom renovation program, and we expect to begin construction in early 2021. So we know that the global airline and the passenger traffic will rebound. It always does, it always has, and it will come back stronger than we were before. And as with the other TBUs across the Department of Transportation, we're working to be prepared when the industry recovers. With that, I'll turn it back over to Secretary Slater. Greg, it's yours.
Sorry, I apologize. I was muted. I just want to say thank you, Ricky, and thank you to the whole team for the presentations. At this point, I will turn it back over to our esteemed chairs, and we're here to answer any questions you may have. And just thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. We have a full agenda of witnesses. We do, and those people wishing to testify. So we'd certainly appreciate, everybody's input. And with that, we'll turn it over to County Executive Mark Elrich and Councilmember Tom Hucker. And I know that Councilmember Tom Hucker is speaking on behalf of, and I know that we have other council members joining us, Councilmembers Albornoz, Glass, the President, Katz, Councilmembers Friedson, Jawando, Reamer, and Navarro. So with that, Mr. Executive, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thanks for letting me speak tonight. And also I want to say hi to Secretary Slater, who I know has inherited a really difficult job at a really difficult time. So I guess it's thank you for being willing to do that job now. So I've got a list of things that, that our DOT has put together. First is, we have concerns about the overall fiscal capacity to operate and maintain and develop our transportation structure. We are well aware of reductions in revenues, but the ability of the state to develop new infrastructure and operate and maintain our existing system was stressed before this 20% reduction of revenues. And this is only going to stress it more. Furthermore, revenues generated from transit operations in MTA and WMATA may continue to suffer, which will put another hurt on our ability and the transit agency's abilities to manage things. So, I guess our view is that, you're looking at the future of Maryland, and the negative consequences of not being able to fund infrastructure could well produce a downward spiral for the state. As we struggle to provide, infrastructure, and, business looks to infrastructure as a marker of, what are you willing to invest in and how's that going to affect us? Maryland and Virginia on two very different trajectories. You and I have talked about that before. Their ability to invest and willingness to invest, and even to, God forbid I say it, raise taxes to invest, have led them to be able to position themselves in a place that we're not able to get to. And so we think that, despite the fact that it's difficult, the state should continue to look at other funding solutions to try to address this. On the purple line, I really appreciate the efforts that you've made on this project. The negotiations were the negotiations, and the result, is the result. But you acted very quickly to maintain the contracts with the subcontractors and to maintain the ability to do work. And I think, our greatest concern is that this project would lie waiting for months, if not years, at great harm to the community in general. And, your steps, assure that it can go forward, but you have long-term issues you have to resolve with that. And, our hope is that, you'll continue to look at opportunities to maybe modify some of what was planned that hasn't already been built to try to reduce some of the costs, but maintain the quality of service. I'm not an advocate for reducing quality of service because that knocks ridership, but what you can do to make it, maintain the service and maybe be more cost effective would be really important. And we're hoping that, you'll rethink the borrowing plan. I think, there's some ruling now from the feds about, borrowing money, whether it's from whether it's from an entity or from a bank, still counts as borrowing as far as the state's concerned. If you're going to pay back a concessionaire or pay back, bonding with a bond, it may well be treated the same. The simple fact is you can borrow money for less than anybody else can. And money is going to be a critical thing here. So to the extent that the state can manage its borrowing and not rely on a third party to borrow the money, could help you reduce costs in a way that would help you complete this project more efficiently. On the managed lane study, now that, you've incorporated the Frederick piece of this, we think you kind of ought to delay it for a year until the Frederick thing is done and you can incorporate the thing into one complete DEIS that reflects the totality of the project. And again, we consider, particularly since we're primarily talking right now about 270 and the western part of I-95, that you consider a 2-lane solution, not a 4-lane solution. We continue to believe that a 2-lane reversible solution meets the needs of the county. It provides capacity in the peak directions in the morning and the evening and spares you the cost of 2 extra lanes, which would just add to the emptiness of lanes on 270 in non-peak directions, non-rush hour directions. And so I think that's, again, worth looking at. You've got an enormous project here. Anything you can do to manage the costs and achieve your goals, I think, are things that people should be willing to look at. I know engineers love symmetry, but sometimes symmetry is not a good thing. And I want to encourage you to start at the American Legion Bridge. I felt from the beginning that that is the choke point from which everything backs up. And to the extent that the bridge gets relieved, you will be able to see how the rest of the road network behaves with that bridge fixed. And the last word of caution is, the Purple Line was under study for God knows how many years, more than a decade. And even after all that, and after a concessionaire took over the project, you found things, they found things that weren't known before and weren't accounted for before. The governor is rushing to push through a P3 on the Beltway 270 project, and you haven't done a fraction of the studies that were done and the analysis that was done for the Purple Line. And one can only imagine how many pipelines, cable lines and everything else would have to be moved and adjusted, and what the cost would be to consumers if there's any major changes in water lines, what the cost will be to natural gas customers if we run into having to deal with natural gas lines. As a cautionary tale, when we were doing the Corridor Cities Transitway, one of the things that came up was, and this is well into the planning process, was a natural gas main underneath a place where people planned on going underground. And the cost of adjusting for that would have been hundreds of millions of dollars. So there's a lot to know, and hurrying it up is not good. We appreciate your support on the bus rapid transit system. We want to continue to work on this. Not only are we doing 29, but we're advancing designs on the Veers Mill corridor and on the 355 corridor. And we appreciate your work with us on the 355 corridor. And Chris Conklin and our DOT team has proposals to modify the CCT that would, both make it a lot less expensive and get us to address the major problems, but address the state's, what I think are legitimate concerns about the route of the CCT being so long and convoluted that it didn't really serve the name rapid transit. And we think we can deal with that, but we continue to want to work with you and hopefully, partner on some of these things. We want to make sure that the biotech cluster doesn't freeze. But we also, as you know now, we've signed the joint development agreement with WMATA on the White Flint Metro site. It is 15 acres. The potential for development there and on adjoining parcels that are likely to be triggered by this is millions and millions of square feet. I dare say potential over, a 10 or 15 year period to rival Amazon. And the point I'd make is the governor was willing to put a lot of money into building the necessary infrastructure to support the kind of development that could go in at White Flint. And we believe that we're on track to launching a project that is certainly going to be substantial, if not over a period of time, roughly equal in square footage. And we think this deserves the state's attention because you're the primary beneficiary from income taxes from corporations, because the county doesn't get a piggyback on that. We get the income from residents, but we think that, we can drive something that's going to benefit the state's economy and the county's economy. And so we'd appreciate, having the opportunity perhaps to discuss with the governor, looking at this with the same kind of sensitivity that he applied when he helped us with the bid we made for Amazon. Again, I want to thank you on the Vision Zero stuff. We continue to prioritize that. We're going to continue to work on that. We would like to be able to put in some of those flexible poles that are being used in the district and other jurisdictions that square off corners, make them safer, force drivers to, make the turn at an appropriate speed. And we'd like to have that kind of conversation with you, along with the other support you're giving us. Our big disappointment was pulling the project on Maryland 97 and Georgia Avenue. People have been waiting for this a long time. It is a mess. It's a bottleneck for getting on the Beltway. It's a bottleneck for getting from Wheaton to Silver Spring. And that intersection crossing is just absolutely terrible for residents. So anything we can do to try to bump that up, we would greatly appreciate it. And I'll just close by saying, and you and I've talked about this before, please look at Virginia's taxing structure on commercial property. I know competitiveness is always a discussion, so I'm pointing you in the direction of a competitor. And I'm pointing you in the direction of somebody who you know has been able to do projects that we would only dream about, and do them at a scale and do them in a timely manner. And it all comes down to how the decisions they made about raising money. They are not, tapping out the general fund or the highway trust fund. They're able to generate this money on long-term bonds based on long-term payments. I think the state needs another game plan. The county's looking at this as well. We would love to partner with you because projects that you advance and we advance together are going to benefit both of us. So this is all about, to the extent we can create jobs, income, and taxes, we all wind up winning, and you'll depend less on shrinking trust fund money and more on money that comes is really from people who are investing in the future of Montgomery County. So with that, I'll say thank you, and I really do appreciate the work you're doing. Always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to try and touch on a few, just to kind of comment on a few, and I would love to kind of sit and collaborate on a couple of things. I know you and I are trying to find some time to sit and talk about 355 as well, but I think let me start with on the Montgomery Hills front. I completely agree with you. So the cut that we had to make there was really that beyond 30% design. As we were trying to build our program, it was really much of a nickel and dime kind of a thing where we could find a couple dollars here and a couple dollars there, but I know the whole MDOT team. I know Tim at the state highway team as well. They know how important that project is to me and how much I really like that project as well. I think it's a really important project. I also think it's and I'll put US 1 and College Park in the same category, but it's a great example of how we need to redesign a lot of the arterial roadways around our interstate system to be more in line with the real land uses that are there, the pedestrian movements, those types of things. And the fact that that is right across from the metro station, I think it's ripe to be a great example for how we should be designing it and maintaining a lot of these roadways. So I look forward to trying to get that one back in as we recover. From an economic perspective, we're really looking at, our models are showing this from a revenue perspective as almost a 2-year type of a process. The first year is really about kind of trying to stop the damage, and then it's really about building it. So, the way we're trying to lay out this recovery is getting back into that stable trust fund as we build up that kind of planning, system preservation, investing in those next projects in D&E, getting those projects ready, but building some stability over this 2-year period in our program so that we can design, build it, and maintain the infrastructure the way we need to, the way you're talking about there. And so I agree with that completely. We're going to keep working on the purple line. The negotiations are still ongoing, although we've taken over some of those. I spoke to them twice today personally, and probably I think it was 3 or 4 times yesterday. So we're continuing to have those discussions in a variety of ways, and so we're continuing to work on that. But our biggest focus is making sure the purple line gets built, and the citizens that live around there and the citizens that are going to use it are not impacted any more than they absolutely have to be. So we're really going to kind of focus on that. But as we take over these contracts, I've talked to the team. It's really important for us to have a really, really strong dialogue with the community so we can work together on those things. And I would put the delegation in that category as well as the county to continue to work with us. We're going to pick it up and deliver, but we can't do it the best way we can unless we have input and collaboration with you and kind of helping us understand some of these things. And then I'm going to try really hard not to comment too much on the DEIS portion of the managed lane because it's still in that comment period. And, I was my old school NEPA training was always kind of taught to now's the time to really be quiet and listen and only listen. So that I'm really trying hard to do that. But I know our focus and our team's focus is on the American Legion Bridge, and that's part of our discussions with Virginia. So, I'm happy to as we get out of that, to really sit down and talk and collaborate and see if there are opportunities to work together on some things and focus on some of those things as we look at American Legion. But I just we do want to take a minute and thank you. You know, I know you and I think we first got to know each other in the White Flint process. And so I'm really happy to kind of collaborate on a lot of these things. And you have that commitment from me as a department that we just want to collaborate and work together on things.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hucker.
Thank you so much, Senator. Hello, everyone. It's nice to see everybody. And for the record, my name is Tom Hucker. I'm the Vice President of the County Council right now and the Chair of our Transportation and Environment Committee. On behalf of the County Council, I want to thank our outstanding delegation chairs first, Senator Craig Zucker, Delegate Mark Corman, and all of the members of our Senate and House delegations. I know firsthand how hard you all work and all the hours you put in. Thank you so much, Secretary Slater and Administrator Quinn, and all the elected officials and public officials that have joined us today. And I want to bring thanks and greetings on behalf of all of my colleagues, especially Council President Sidney Katz, and my other colleagues that Chairman Zucker mentioned earlier. As you all know, Montgomery County is the most populous jurisdiction in the state and the largest local economy. Over 1 million Marylanders call our jurisdiction home, including tens of thousands who have moved here from 170 nations. And some are working overtime at NIH or Novavax or our other private biotech firms to find a cure to COVID. Some are working as essential workers in our hospitals and our fire and rescue services and our grocery stores. But regardless of where they work, their ability to get to work efficiently or not affects the whole state and our economy. Hundreds of thousands of residents from neighboring jurisdictions commute and travel through our boundaries as well. And Montgomery County's priority is to ensure we move all our residents and workers from neighboring counties through our county safely and efficiently. With a majority of our county's roads maintained by SHA and a majority of our transit services at least partially funded by MDOT, collaboration between MDOT and the county and municipal governments is without a doubt the single most important factor impacting how well our constituents and our commerce move through our county. COVID-19 is changing our commutes and it's changing the nature of our workplaces. A recession is crippling our revenues. We have to reassess the lens through which we viewed all the projects in our CIPs for years. The importance of our projects to drive economic growth is more important than ever, and we have to choose and prioritize the projects that are the best investments for our limited capital dollars to mitigate the risks to other projects and to our budget as a whole. So specifically, number one, on the Purple Line, thank you so much, Secretary Slater, for your commitment to get it done. As you know, my colleagues and I called on the governor to echo your commitment and Administrator Quinn's commitment, and he's done that. So we're grateful to him as well. We're grateful that you've taken over the contracts. I got to say, I have almost a dozen stations just in my district alone, and that is a great relief to my anxious constituents and those in District 1 as well. And Matt has been great to work with since he started as well. Obviously, we need MDOT to secure the funding to finish the line according to the original scope of the project and to complete it with as little additional delays as possible. If it's necessary to defer other state projects in the CTP, as has been mentioned, unfortunately, as much as I hate to say it, that has to be done because the Purple Line is the top economic development project in the state, and it should take priority. In the short term, we need MDOT to address the effects of the work stoppage, including some of those items you mentioned specifically. And we're in my recent letter to you, eliminating the detours onto residential streets, instituting proper pedestrian safety measures and general street maintenance, securing inactive construction sites, and enacting a moratorium on commercial evictions and a limit on commercial rent increases in the areas that were most affected by the construction. We're not bystanders, as you know, in this whole process. We have skin in the game. Besides being the largest county contributors to the state budget, Montgomery County has invested over $200 million of our taxes into associated projects at the governor's request. The Bethesda Metro South entrance, the Capitol Crescent Trail, the Silver Spring Green Trail, the $40 million we put into the Purple Line itself, and the cost of the closing the right-of-way. Further delays to the Purple Line means further delays to realizing the benefits of our investment and your investment. So we want to do whatever we can to work with you to minimize those. On the managed lane study, this county executive said a lot I agree with. Certainly, we appreciate the state and FHA's willingness to extend the deadline for comments on the DEIS till November 9th. On November 5th, you'll receive our final preferred alternative. And so you'll have that by the new deadline. We know, you should know now that we will certainly oppose additional through lanes on the Beltway east of the 270 West Spur. We'll want a specific commitment of funds over the next few years to significantly improve transit on the I-270 corridor, and we won't want to provide any county funds for that project. Third, on the CCT, as the county executive also said, we very much appreciate MDOT's restoring of the project in the CTP as we requested at this very hearing last year. The construction of the CCT is the most effective tool to unlock 6.4 million square feet of commercial development opportunity in the Great Seneca Science Corridor, which is arguably the most important economic development opportunity in the state of Maryland. We have to do everything we can to keep that moving ahead and not allow it to be stalled. On Vision Zero, so glad to hear Chrissy talk earlier about our joint work on the Vision Zero initiative. We're proud to be leaders among other jurisdictions in the state on that issue. Montgomery County is in the third year of our Vision Zero plan. In the first 2 years, we worked very closely with MDOT to identify many hazardous locations and implement different safety countermeasures on state and county roads, but we have a long way to go. In 2019, we had 496 pedestrian crashes, up from 457 the previous year and up from our 3-year average going back to 2015. So we ask that MDOT initiate a new statewide program with significant funding to implement pedestrian and bike safety engineering improvements with a particular emphasis on both urban and suburban communities and transit access. And we hope that you'll continue to evaluate each project individually to make sure the projects are really informed by Vision Zero and that they will result in improved safety outcomes. We have many projects in the CIP that weren't created with that lens, and we really hope you'll work with us to look at every project through that lens in the future. On the BRT, as you mentioned, yesterday, we're so happy that we launched Maryland's first bus rapid transit line. The Flash BRT was funded by our county funds and a federal Tiger grant, of course, to create this 14-mile line that will run along Route 29 from the Silver Spring Metro to Burtonsville with 11 stops along the way. Thanks so much to MDOT for completing the shoulder repairs on US 29. And we just ask that the shoulder condition remain a high priority on that roadway because it'll require continued maintenance. In addition, to address congestion, I want to ask the state to fund and support construction of the additional BRTs on Maryland 355 between Clarksburg and Bethesda and on Maryland 586 between Rockville and Wheaton. Just like the US 29 BRT, these two additional lines will give additional economic development, will drive additional economic development. They'll provide upgraded transit service, obviously, to residents, and they'll help take cars off our roads. Given that the proposed BRTs are all on state roads, we need your help, MDOT's engagement during design and construction, and your financial participation in these projects is really going to be critical to their success, Mr. Secretary. And a few quick individual priorities in different districts for my colleagues here in District 14. I want to underscore the importance of the improvements to Maryland 198, the intersection improvements on Maryland 97 and 28, the major bottleneck in the northern portion of the county, and the sidewalks on Maryland 108 and the congestion relief and safety improvements all along US 29 at Greencastle Road, Blackburn Road, and Tech Road in particular. In D18, the county executive and you already discussed the importance of restoring the planning funds on Georgia Avenue. That's really critical, and you're right. It's a very important project, and it's ripe to drive economic development, as you mentioned, Mr. Secretary. Thank you. District 39 on Route 27 in Damascus, they are seeing a lot of higher speeds due to reduced traffic from COVID and lots of fatal crashes, something that was the subject of our public safety hearing today in the county council. And there are a lot of 18-wheelers avoiding enforcement at weigh stations along 270 by exiting at I-70 and then taking 27 down through Damascus. So aside from the noise issues, that's really a safety and enforcement issue as well. We urge MDOT to fund the starting and completion of the design of the intersection improvements on Maryland 117 in Gaithersburg. Now that the Watkins Mill Road is open, interchange is open, the need for those improvements is really more important than ever. And finally, we wanted to urge you to restore the proposed $400,000 cut in aid to replace the ride-on buses that have reached the end of their useful lives. Secretary, thank you again so much for your attention to our priorities. Not only are Montgomery County taxpayers the greatest source of revenue for the state, but advancing the Montgomery County economy through addressing our transportation needs really boosts the entire state's economy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Great to see you. Great to hear from you. We have a lot of common areas here, so I'll kind of talk through a few of them with you, and then if I missed anything, we can certainly follow up. In the purple line, completely agree with you. We're going to continue to work collaboratively on there. We are going to restart and try and reschedule, get some of the CAT meetings started again. So, I may be reaching out to you for a little bit of advice. I think we want to really kind of engage that group in a little bit more of a comprehensive way so that we can get that group started, especially with some of the transition period that we're seeing right now. But we want to really reduce any kind of work stoppages and those types of things that you see, as well as really understand from the community the real harsh pain points as we develop where our priorities are that we're going to focus on in this transition area. So I think those will be critical for that, but we'll continue to work on that. On the managed lane study, I look forward to getting that letter, but also, what I would propose is after we get that and that comment period closes, that we sit down and we talk through that and kind of work through some of those issues. I'd love the opportunity to kind of do that. On the CCT, we'll continue to work on that one. I put that one, that's a BRT as well as 355 and Beers Mill. So, I remember working on both 355 Beers Mill and the CCT. CCT originally, you'll remember, was part of it. It was all part of 270. It was all together, and then it got split. But 355, we worked on so many opportunities in 355, especially through the White Flint area. But there's so many mobility opportunities on the north side of that as well. Beers Mill has tremendous transit ridership today that can really show a real success in a bus rapid transit line. So, we're excited about that. And then, Vision Zero, we'd love to continue to work with you on those. I can follow up and let you know exactly where some of those specific ones were on 97, 28, 108, those types of things. But I will finalize a note and tell you that Senator King and I had a long phone call the other day about the cut through traffic on 27. So I'm working on a couple of issues with her office, and that'll help alleviate some of the community there.
Terrific.
So great to see you, and I'm happy to keep collaborating.
Thanks so much, Greg. Talk to you.
Councilman Hooker, holding the water for the municipalities tonight is Gaithersburg Gaithersburg Council Vice President Lori Ann Sales.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman, Senator Zucker and Delegate Corman, members of our state delegation, our county executive and county council. I would like to start by thanking you, Secretary Slater, and your team for the opportunity to comment on the projects included in the fiscal year 21 through 26 CTP. On behalf of Mayor Ashman and the City Council, I would like to extend our deepest gratitude to the state for helping the City of Gaithersburg achieve our vision of connecting the east and west corridors of our city with the construction of the Watkins Mill interchange. I'd also like to commend MDOT for completing such a vital project for the city, not only ahead of schedule, but in the midst of an unprecedented national pandemic and a statewide stay-at-home order. We are keenly aware of the economic challenges and uncertainty surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic and the fiscal impacts on virtually all MDOT operations and revenues. And we understand that extremely difficult decisions must be made both now and in the longer term. Currently, the city's most pressing need is to address the safety and capacity issues that remain at MD 117, where Clopper and Diamond intersect. Over the last 2 decades, the City of Gaithersburg has undergone significant changes. We are the fastest growing city in the state and home to the state's biotech corridor. 5 of which are leading the efforts to bring a vaccine to market. Despite this period of growth, the project has been put on the back burner as a funding priority. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the completion of the Watkins Mill interchange was expected to significantly impact the use of Copper Road, especially where it intersects with Watkins Mill, Quince Orchard, and Long Draft roads. However, as traffic patterns begin to normalize, we expect the capacity and safety issues you've heard to reemerge. It is our hope that the state will find the resources to make interim improvements. These critical infrastructure improvements are necessary to address the daily safety and commuter challenges our residents face. Additionally, we would like to request that MDOT reconsider funding for the Brunswick line in the FY21 through 26 ETP to address the increasingly pressing need for improvements outlined in MDOT MTA's capital needs inventory report regarding facility maintenance and station renovations to ensure riders safe, reliable, and pleasant experience. This line provides residents and visitors the ability to commute to job centers, access services, and enjoy activities and recreation outside of the city. Prior to the pandemic, the Brunswick line boarded a combined average of 500 riders each workday and carried 22% of all marked passengers. The line also had the second largest share of average annual passengers throughout the MARC train system and is an important element to the city's ongoing economic growth. Finally, the city is committed to seeing the CCT, Corridor Cities Transitway, completed. As we have stated in the past, the CCT would be a crucial link to facilitate the economic growth of the biotech corridor in Montgomery County and in the state of Maryland. We believe that prioritizing resources now for this unique transit project will be an exciting opportunity for interjurisdictional cooperation. In closing, I want to express our sincere appreciation for the state's investment in the city's essential transportation infrastructure projects. We look forward to continuing to work with the state and county to ensure that this process is executed smoothly. And we thank you for your time and consideration of our comments.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman. Great to have you here with us tonight. Let me touch on a little bit and see if Administrator Quinn or Administrator Smith wants to add anything. First on Watkins Mill, that was a tremendous team effort. I'd be remiss to not take a minute and say that, it wasn't just SHA. A lot of members of the community, a lot of members of the delegation worked on that one for many years. And so opening that project a little bit early was a great success for us. And, I happened to travel that corridor a lot, and it was kind of fun to watch that thing kind of come together with the, going across 270. So Mayor Ashman did talk to me a little bit about 117 and Clapper and Diamond. We're trying to look at that and see if there are any opportunities to kind of touch on that. But we have had that discussion, and we've been kind of looking out as well, because I know he highlighted that same issue of the concern of Watkins Mill opening up, and then that intersection. We did have some drainage issues that we were kind of working on as well there, but we'll continue to work together on that one. When it comes to the Brunswick line and the CCT, one of the things that we're working on right now is we've embarked on the process for the first time in the state's history, a full statewide transit plan. And so, we had a lot of successes. We're really happy with some of the work that we've done around the Baltimore region with some of our planning, that Central Maryland Regional Transit Plan. But we had so many other plans, the MARC reinvestment plan, the capital needs inventories, all of those plans. And so one of the things that I noticed when I came in to this position is I felt like we had these somewhat siloed transit plans. And so there's an opportunity to kind of lay that out as a state and and Kevin and his team with Kate and Holly are leading that charge for us. But I'm really excited about how that can really play into the interoperability and the connection of our network to lay out that 50-year vision. What does it look like? If we, what does that transit system that we're working for statewide look like? And it's not a project by project thing, but what does the system look like so that we can start tackling these things one by one? But at this point, I'll take a pause and see if anything that Kevin or Tim want to add.
I'll just, yeah, thank you, Secretary. So I'll just add, we have, we do have the Mark Cornerstone plan that I think really outlines, a series of improvements on the Brunswick line that would, increase capacity and lays out what we can do with the funding we have. I think, we do need to look at the long-term effects of what's happening with COVID. The dramatic decreases that we're seeing on the Mark line are happening to commuter rail nationwide, where I was on a call the other day with several other sort of administrators of transit agencies around the country, and they're all seeing this roughly 90% drop in commuter rail ridership. And that's kind of plateaued, as other parts of the country have opened up, that 90% has kind of plateaued. It's not really budging a whole lot. So if that's the case, we should take a look at our parking lots and our stations, and are we seeing ridership pop up in one area more than another, or on certain trains, on certain trips more than others? But I think COVID, I think, has thrown us all for a loop. I mean, here we are on a Zoom call instead of being in person as we normally would, right? And so I think we're honestly, we're still waiting to kind of see how it shakes out. But certainly the statewide transit plan, as the Secretary noted, I think is a great venue and a great effort to reevaluate what those trends are looking like, and again, see how to best use the funding that we do have.
How are you prioritizing once you have all of the projects laid out? Will you be prioritizing? What criteria will you?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with so one is ridership, and another piece is parking. I know along the Brunswick line there are several stations that pre-COVID were at parking capacity. I was actually just out a week ago at the Brunswick Mark station that normally would be absolutely overflowing. And, when I was out there, had about 20 cars in it. The parking needs are changing. And so I think, where are there parking constraints? Another piece that I don't want to forget about is land use. Just because those parking constraints aren't there doesn't mean that there aren't still tremendous opportunities for transit-oriented development, and where those developments are taking place that can support transit and continue to support the movement of people in and out. So I think there's a number of different pieces to it.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you have, we're going to move on unless you had anything else, Mr. Secretary, to add.
No, not at all. Thank you.
Council member, thank you very much for that. And I know you have other representatives from the city, and there are other municipalities here as well. So thank you for representing their interests as well. We'll now turn to really the hosts of this meeting, the House and Senate delegations, and we're going to just go in district order, starting with my district and my team. We have Delegates Ann Kaiser, Delegate Pam Queen, and Delegate Eric Lukey. Delegate Eric Lukey is not going to be here this evening because he's teaching, but his views are expressed within what we're presenting tonight. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Delegate Ann Kaiser.
Thank you, Senator Zucker, and thank you to all of you, and thank you especially Secretary Slater. All right, so again, brought to you by all of us, and Delegate Lukey's absence was already explained, but he was a part of developing this presentation that Delegate Queen mostly put together. Next slide, please. Slide 2. All right, and just want to say, Mr. Secretary, and to your agencies within, just we really do appreciate the responsiveness, especially now to all of our constituent requests. So a big thank you. Next slide. And we want to start with just to everyone else, sit back, get a drink. We have about 50 slides here, so so give us some time. We're going to start with Maryland 198, Spencerville Road. We want to first really ask about the status of the 28198 study, the part going through the Burtonsville CBD. And we're really curious about that, the money that's been budgeted previously for the design and engineering of Section D. And next, we want to bring up, and we're a broken record on this one, but the sidewalk project on Maryland 198 from Dino Drive to McNew Road. This is our 4th year asking for it, and this is very important to our district, and we would love to get this project moved forward. So I will move next to my colleague on page 4. Passing
Thank
this.
Thank you very much, Delegate Kaiser. So again, we just wanted to reiterate the needed intersection improvements. I think we need to make sure that 9728 intersection is prioritized. It's just a major bottleneck and it's an essential portion of our county. Go to the next page, please. I think you heard it earlier tonight, sidewalks along 108 are a priority, and the county, we are very appreciative of the county who expressed its willingness to fund half of it. But this project's been discussed for a while, and I know that the team and I have had conversations with you, Mr. Secretary, on this as well. So we want to just see if there's any way we can get the funding sooner rather than later on that. And then the funding had been there for Route 108 and Brook Road, where the firefighters are coming out of the Sandy Spring Volunteer Fire Department. And recently we heard that the funding wasn't there anymore. So we'd really like some clarity on what's happening with that intersection, because not only is there a flooding issue, but it's also a public safety issue because we have emergency vehicles coming out and it's not safe. And then finally on this slide, the Laytonsville bypass, we just wanted to see sort of when the study was going to begin, because it'll help alleviate congestion along that corridor. And now I'm going to turn it over to the person who really helped also put this slide together, Delegate Pam Queen.
Thank you very much. Secretary Slater, I think Councilman Hucker talked about the 29 intersections. And so we're really looking for some status. Our residents are really trying to understand what the timeline is. And so whatever feedback you can give us will be very helpful. We listed the Tech Road interchange, although that's not quite in our district, but it does impact our Burtonsville residents. And we're just trying to see how that is coming along as the White Oak Gateway development is going. So we just need some status on that. Will be very much appreciated. We really just want to thank you, though, overall, for the department overall. Secretary, Delegate Lukey couldn't be here today. He's in class, but he really wanted us to make sure we thank the State Highway Administration's 3rd District for getting some signage done on Route 650, addressing some of the Hampshire Green community issues. And so really just want to thank you for the work we're doing. We do appreciate the work you're helping us with constituents, but if we can get some progress on some of these projects, we would be very happy. Thank you so much. That's it.
Thank you so much for really all of these slides, the whole delegation, for really coming together and kind of organizing that. That's really helpful for us as we're trying to look at our program. I'm going to touch on a few things, and I'm going to see if Administrator Tim Smith wants to kind of weigh in as well. We look at, I'm not familiar with the 108 and Brook Road one. He may be more familiar with that one. So we've been working with the county over the last year or so when the 29 in Tech issue, we found that the design was probably a little bit older, and we wanted to make sure it was updated as we started to advance those types of things. And I think, when these projects kind of sit on the shelf for so long, I think we run into that quite frequently. A project is done and then, it'll sit for a little while. And then maybe when you go out there to finish the design or you go out there for construction, it's very different. One of the more challenging things I've been dealing with over the last couple of years is projects sit so long, and you spend a lot of time working with communities on projects and designs, and then it'll sit for a little while. And then when you go out there to build it, it's a completely different community and they have different needs and different wants. And so, you have to be able to pivot and really kind of work with them. But, as we're working through this, I think message received on all of those funding priorities. One of the things that I'm finding in this pandemic situation and the economic situation that's with it is it seems like every week the playbook changes just a little bit. So we're trying to watch that. Unfortunately, we sit here today in a little bit better position than we thought we were going to be 2 or 3 months ago. So, as things are starting to recover, But I think it's going to be critical to see what the impact of this, this potential fall surge might be, and what that's going to be for us. But I'm optimistic that we might have a year this year where our final CTP might be a little different than our draft, and maybe some opportunities will come up to be able to get some funding in. I do want to be very clear that my priority is a couple of things. One is working collaboratively with the delegation and the communities on laying out those priorities, but system preservation, making sure we're investing in the system that we have. But two, really figuring out what that next wave of projects is that we can really invest in the D&E, that the development evaluation program. As I said, D&E, I have Senator Kagan's voice in my ear telling me to stop using acronyms. So I'm trying to remind of
Thank
that.
you, Mr. Secretary.
So, but really trying to lay out that foundation for that next generation of projects, I think is really important. And as we think about investments in both planning and engineering, we're going to have to do that collaboratively and really look at not only what the system needs are, but what our local priorities are as well.
Yeah, so this is Tim Smith from State Highway. Just to add on there, I think on at least the Maryland 198 corridor, we're anticipating getting a newsletter out to the public here, just kind of giving them an update on where things are. But like as Greg said, we're going through some challenging times for our larger overall capital program, but from a system preservation and more of an operational improvements, more than willing to work collaboratively to see where we can make small minor adjustments, whether that's traffic signals and minor improvements from an operational standpoint, just to kind of alleviate. It won't necessarily solve the problem, but alleviate some of the concerns. And then on US 29, I believe we were resurfacing there at Stewart Lane and doing some signal improvements. And that's anticipated next summer, I believe, 2021. So like I said, both with the 29 as well as the 198 corridors, more than willing to reach out and find out where the pain points are. And like Greg mentioned, in some cases, we don't want to progress the design too far without having all our funding, because then it loses its freshness. So like I said, just happy to work with you.
Great, thank you, District 14. We'll now turn to our representative from District 15, Delegate David Fraser Hidalgo.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us again this year, Secretary Slater. It's always wonderful to see you as usual. Thank you for all your work. And your team, and you're muted, by the way. But so just a couple of things that I wanted to cover very quickly. Administrator Smith, you mentioned something earlier about accidents, and I'm wondering, we've done a lot in Annapolis already on my committee and subcommittee to help with move over laws and help to try to create more space. I would love to hear, this is kind of a two-parter, what we can do to help continue that direction as far as making sure we do everything we can to make Maryland's roadways safer. And also on you actually mentioned a little bit of this as well, on the 495 split going westbound or coming from Connecticut Avenue toward 270. I know that's a bit of a hot spot for a lot of truck and semi crashes. What can we do? I know there was a bill in, I think, a year or two ago. What can we do to make that area, A, safer, and B, be able to clear those accidents out more quickly? Because my understanding is that it's kind of can be a long wait sometimes, and maybe other parties need to get involved more along the state lines to help clear some of those accidents. So it's kind of a two-parter for you, and they kind of in some ways really go together.
Agreed. So I think there's, back to the ease part, I think there's an education and an enforcement part there, both. Back to just the overall move over laws, I think a lot of folks don't necessarily know what they're supposed to do in some cases. And I think there's a huge educational opportunity there, and love to partner with you on figuring out how the best way to get that word out. I think back to the 495 part, I think there's an enforcement part there as well. And like I said, we're partnering with MSP on that. There's also an education part on just, I think part of the reason we've had an uptick in accidents there is as traffic reduced, truck traffic didn't really reduce as much. And I think they picked up their speeds a little too much through that corridor. And that's what caused some challenges. I think there's an engineering part to that too. I think We've deployed some innovative techniques to improve the friction of roadways. I think there's an opportunity to do that there, but that still doesn't address the incidents once they've happened. I've worked with our chart department, and we have, in some cases, redeployed some of our resources to be able to respond quicker. But the challenge is when we have a major jackknife tractor trailer and overturned tractor trailer, it is going to be difficult. And I think back to the enforcement and education part, the best thing we can do is not to have that one to begin with. Because if the best I'm going to be able to save is minutes, it's still going to be hours worth of delays. So I think there's a lot more value in the education and enforcement part on that side.
Okay, so just a follow-up. So is in state highway, when there are jackknife trailers or when there's a lot of vehicles involved, when it's, becomes a really big kind of mess, is state highway able to go and help clear that? Or do you always have to contract with a third party to clear some of those big accidents?
We currently don't have the resources internally with some of the heavy rigs to be able to do that. So we're always using a third party to assist us with that.
Okay, and so if state highway had is it because you're not allowed to by law, or is it because you don't have the equipment to do that?
Don't quote me on this one, but I'm pretty sure we don't have, I know we don't have the equipment, and I think we're allowed to by law, because we do that with some of our smaller incidents. It's quite an investment to get one of those heavy tow trucks.
Yeah, and then drive it all over the state, right? Secretary Slater, you look like you've got something on your mind you want to say.
I will add, you and I worked on, if I recall correctly, we had some liability issues in terms of, hooking up to some of these bigger trucks, those types of things. So I think if we're trying to look for a solution there, I would suggest that we would all work with Maryland Motor Truck Association and see if there's a solution that we can work together. Because my experience with them over the last couple of years is they're all about trying to solve some of these issues where our truck drivers are really speeding, because there's some real challenges, especially on that top side of the Beltway. That area by Connecticut has been a challenge for us for years, especially going west. People tend to come around that corner and then all of a sudden realize that that exit is right up on them, and they tend to go across a couple of lanes of traffic to get off on Connecticut in particular. So that's been a challenge for us for years.
Yeah, so I would be happy to both of you to work on those issues. Those three issues, I guess, is one, how do we really slow down that traffic in that area? Because I understand that the truck accidents are just more than ever. And how do we make sure that we can get the hookups and get that it cleared? If there's anything we need to do legislatively, I'm all in. And third, again, we've passed some laws already, but how do we increase education? Is there anything else we can do to save some folks that are, that are frontline workers on the outside of the Beltway, not only Maryland state troopers, but police officers and tow truck drivers. And it's very scary to be out there on a road and a car comes whizzing by you at 65 or 70 miles an hour. So if you can put your thinking caps on, at least before session, if there's something we need to do legislatively, or if it's just policy in another way, I'm happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Delegate. And I'm sure the administration will be in touch with you on that, because I know it's very important. We'll now move on to District 16, the district that Chairman Corman is in. We'll be hearing from Senator Susan Lee and Delegate Sarah Love. Whoever wants to start first. Delegate Love.
Senator, do you want to start? Do you want me to start? Oh, she disappeared. Okay. I guess I'm taking on.
Yeah, I will let my wonderful colleague, Delegate Sarah Love, speak for our team, District 16.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you. And thank you to our two chairs, Senator Zucker and my teammate, Delegate Corman. I also want to send regrets for Delegate Ariana Kelly, another member of our team. And just to say thank you again, like my colleagues have said, we certainly appreciate this every year, and we appreciate all the work that you all do. Secretary Slater, it's wonderful to see you not across the table. So this is lovely. I really appreciate all your work, and you continue to impress me with your knowledge that you can just, rattle off the top of your head. Just a couple of things I want to touch on behalf of our constituents. First, I want to thank you for addressing bicycle safety on MD 187, Old Georgetown. We've had some really tragic accidents there, so we appreciate your work there. Also on MD 190 River Road, also, a lot of speeding along that area. And I know that your department has worked with our constituents and gotten a lot of input and reduced the speed. And sometimes people do it and sometimes they don't, but it does feel much calmer there. So I really appreciate the efforts that you've put into traffic calming on that. People have talked about the Purple Line. That's another topic of big interest to our constituents. Not surprisingly, a large number of our constituents are very much opposed to the Beltway widening. They're very concerned about their property, about the expenses for moving WSSC's pipelines. They are concerned about environmental justice and what that will do to certain communities. And whether the state will have to take over and assume the project like it is for the Purple Line. Just two quick questions. First of all, to Executive Director Smith. I know we had this conversation last year, but I wanted to touch base with you about the airplane noise and the need for the MAA's expertise in this area. And I was wondering if you could fill us in a little bit on what's going on with the noise study and what you all are doing with respect to that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Let me touch on a few of those and then I'll hand it over to Executive Director Smith and he can kind of end with the noise study. Couldn't agree more on the bike safety side. There's so much that we need to do from an engineering standpoint, but also from an education standpoint to just try and get a little bit more civility from our drivers to just be a little bit more patient. A few minutes may seem like an eternity when you're trying to get around a bicyclist, but it really is a matter of life and death. And we just need people to be patient and work with them as part of our transportation system. So we'll continue to work on those a lot. The River Road project, I think was one that was a long time coming. I know I have to credit Delegate Corman. He's the one that first put it on my radar. I think it was the first week I was on the job as a state highway administrator, and he gave me a call and just kind of put that on my radar. And so I reached out to the community and we worked together on that. And I think we ended in a really good place where we were able to enhance some of the pedestrian movements, but also change the look and feel of that roadway to help slow some of that traffic down. You're still going to have a number of people that will drive fast through there. And, we hope with some enforcement, you can modify that behavior, but I was glad to see that one. The Purple Line, I will reiterate, we are committed to getting that one done. If you have any concerns from yourself as well as from your constituents, we're happy to work through them. Our executive director for the Purple Line, Matt, is on here with us tonight, but he's really been spending a lot of time with community members, just kind of walking the corridors and members of the delegation. I know he's doing some others, but really focusing on not only the construction, but the area around the Purple Line, pedestrian safety and work zones and those types of things to make sure it's acceptable for the community that we're going through. And then, I hear you on the Beltway and I'm happy to sit down and kind of talk through some of those issues. Once we get out of the DEIS and really kind of look at some of those, I always welcome a conversation where we can kind of really roll up our sleeves and kind of look at some things in detail to understand them and then just kind of work through and see if we can find some common ground on some of those things. So I'm happy to continue to work with you on those. And at this point, I'll pause and see if Executive Director Smith wants to talk about the noise challenges.
Thank you.
Yes, so this is Ricky Smith. I will ask that the question be repeated. It wasn't clear to me, the question on noise.
Sure. When last we had this meeting, you and I had a conversation about the airplane noise.
Yes.
And the concerns that a lot of people have, not only in my corridor, which heads into Washington National, but also in the BWI corridor. Yes. So I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about what was going on and the study that you all were looking into.
Okay, so and thanks a lot for the question. In both cases, court actions were filed by the state's Attorney General's office. In the case of BWI, an administrative petition was filed, in the case of traffic noise issues coming out of Reagan National, an actual lawsuit was filed. Both, again, the state of Maryland took both actions. Both of those actions continue to be in the court process. We're still waiting for the judge to make a finding. With respect to BWI, however, a decision was made with the FAA and the courts to bring closure to that issue because the local airport noise roundtable was able to make a series of recommendations to the FAA to mitigate the impact of noise coming out of BWI Marshall Airport. The FAA has established a committee to review those recommendations. We're optimistic that some, if not all, but more than likely some of those recommendations will be adopted, which will result in some improvement. And so because the FAA committed to give real consideration to those recommendations, they in essence answered what was asked for in the Attorney General's administrative petition with respect to BWI. Okay. The legal issues related to noise issues coming out of Reagan National continue to be working their way through the legal process in the courts. In terms of the committee that's trying to address issues of noise affecting Montgomery County and Prince George's County, that is a committee that is controlled and managed by the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority. We, the state of Maryland, Maryland Aviation Administration, has little to no control or influence over that committee, but we are working with the Attorney General's office to take aggressive actions in the legal form to try to make sure that we get some movement from the FAA.
And are you participating in any, my understanding is there was a study on the health effects and the noise effects
so there,
from the airplane?
So the last General Assembly passed legislation that would authorize the Secretary's office to issue a grant to a local university to conduct that study.
Right.
The Secretary of Transportation Secretary Slater has agreed to authorize that funding to UMBC to conduct that study. And so they're now going through the process of pulling together the team to conduct that study.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And if I may, I have one more question for you, Secretary Slater, and for Administrator Neiser. I was very surprised to learn, I have a 13-year-old son, that young men still need to sign up for a selective service administration. And in early August, I had sent both of your offices a letter regarding a 2002 law requiring MVA to provide this information when young men go in to get a driver's license. It was contingent on MVA receiving federal funding for the initial startup costs. And the MVA administrator was responsible for initiating and monitoring the efforts to receive these funds. And I'm just curious if that has happened, that initiation and monitoring, and if not, is there anything that we can do to assist you all in moving that forward?
Sure, absolutely. Let me start and then see if Administrator Neiser wants to add anything. I'm able to answer this question because I'm absolutely horrified at the fact that we have some real challenges with our delays in letter responses right now, and the logistical piece of kind of everybody in the environment. So I believe just the end of last week, I signed the response to your letter. So you should be getting it very soon. But I don't believe that grant was ever obtained. So, you know, we're continuing to kind of work through that. But Chrissy, did you, do you recall that one? I don't think the federal grant.
That's exactly right. And you might not have received the letter yet, but you should get it shortly. There was no federal funding that was ever provided. You know, as part of our response, we mentioned that with our new IT system that I mentioned, we have a lot more flexibility in terms of implementing new requirements. With that being said, there has been some legislation before the General Assembly to consider, you know, who it should be applying for selective service and how that process should work. And so certainly we would look to the legislature if there was going to be a policy decision related to selective service in general.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Delegate Love, my colleague from District 16. Before we turn to District 17, let me just say, Mr. Secretary, obviously I get the chance to see you in my Appropriations Committee hat on a lot of these big issues all the time. So I'll just echo the thanks of my colleagues. But I do want to mention, because I want to make sure my colleagues are aware that there's a lot of concerns with the P3, not only the DEIS, but also the contracting process. And I know you're going to explain to me why a progressive P3 is different than the type of P3 that the Purple Line is under, and we can have that back and forth. But I just want to make sure my colleagues realize that the Reason Foundation, no friends of mine on transportation policy, have found that the vast majority of road P3s require a state government subsidy. That's a taxpayer subsidy. And that one of the shortlisted finalist teams that you've selected includes Meridian, which is the majority partner in the Purple Line Transit Partners, the only other P3 currently going on under our state law, and I would say not going on very well when it comes to the contracting piece. So you can respond to that now, or we can say it for appropriations, but that's just a really big concern that I want to make sure all of my Montgomery County colleagues are aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just, I know you and I have had the discussion about the differences in the Purple Line. I'm not familiar with the Reason Foundation report. I do, on that side, just, I don't want to comment on a report that I haven't seen, but I'm happy to work through those and kind of make sure that there's enough protections in place. What I'm finding too on the rail side, there's tremendous amount of cost overruns across the nation on rail projects. And I think that has a lot to do with, I think there are just there are very few rail projects compared to highway projects across this nation. So maybe the estimating process on the highway side is a little bit more mature, but there are some stark differences. And I know maybe you and I have a difference of opinion on the differences between those two contracting mechanisms and the protections, but I am happy to continue to have that conversation with you and have that dialogue with you and see if we can, see if maybe I can make you feel more comfortable about the contracting mechanism itself.
Sure. The largest progressive P3 in the country right now, I believe, is the Silver Line Phase 2, another P3 that's not going particularly well. So with that, let me turn it over to my colleagues from District 17, Senator Kagan, Chair of the Transportation Committee, Kumar Barve, and Delegate Polakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Delegate Corman. Secretary Slater and team, thank you. Good to be with you, even though it's virtual. I always introduce myself as Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. But I also say that my district is up 270, up 355, up the Metro Red Line and the MARC line. And so transportation is fundamental for our district. I don't have the fancy PowerPoint like District 14, but I do have a bunch of questions that I'm going to run through. So for Gaithersburg, first off, want to add my thanks to the Watkins Mill interchange. It's awesome and very convenient, helps with traffic and hopefully economic development in that northern part of Gaithersburg. 117 Clopper and Diamond, want to reiterate what Councilmember Sales said, really hoping for some action on that. And I have been asked over and over the years, and I think we've talked about this, on the ICC, why is it that the westbound direction that we can't have Gaithersburg as the destination on the sign as part of the visibility, or frankly, Gaithersburg, Rockville, but certainly we really should be advertising and doing economic development. It's just a sign exchange. So really want to make that pitch. In terms of Rockville, over a year ago, I had a meeting with some of your team and we talked about 270 and 189 Falls Road, the northbound exit when you have to get off and get over 3 lanes to try to get onto Great Falls Road. There have been accidents there. That interchange is a hot mess. I saw work crews there. They looked like they were doing research and stuff, and that's been eons, and I've seen no action. So I would love an update. If not tonight, then maybe we can work on that. I don't want to lose the momentum from the commitments that have been made there. So those were the 2 municipalities. Now I want to take the more global look. Not as a senator, but just as a Rockville resident, this flyer was left on my doorknob the other day. My constituents are very concerned about 270, 495.
The mayor and council of Rockville have made an announcement, are getting us a formal letter of concern. The cost overruns in the purple line lead to even more concerns about $9 billion when we're looking at economic shortfalls and challenges on a project that just hasn't earned buy-in. You and I have talked about the mystery of the tolls. And I can tell you that the one time when I was driving in Northern Virginia and was trying to figure out the signage and trying to get in the correct lane to not pay the tolls and ended up paying over $60 to take a toll lane that I did not intend, could not afford, and was not seeking to take. So signage and toll prices is really important in addition to protecting neighborhoods, businesses, and others with the area. And obviously, Delegate Corman, Delegate Love, and Delegate Barve, I think Chairman Barve is going to be talking about this, and certainly others. But there is a great deal of trepidation about the project and whether it's really going to do what we need it to and how much it's going to cost, not just all taxpayers with $9 billion, but truly the tolls. And we have a lot of constituents that are not going to be able to afford that and yet need to be able to drive to work. Then the last thing I want to shift to WMATA and Mark. I'd love for someone to talk about fare box recovery and the reality of as passenger load is down and therefore fare box recovery is going to be impossible. I am very worried about what's going to happen and whether rates, the ability to ride on mass transit is going to become unaffordable for our working families. And then the last thing I've got, it has become really noticeable that mowing and trimming on the Beltway and elsewhere is way, way back. You're talking about Vision Zero, which I applaud, but there are going to be crashes because people can't see the signs. They can't see the exit until they're on top of it. They can't see anything like that. I don't know whether that's COVID related, budget related or something, but maybe Mr. Smith or someone could address that issue as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Senator. Let me touch on a few of these and then I'll see if maybe Administrator Quinn as well as Administrator Smith want to kind of touch on that. And then our Executive Director Ports may want to touch on the ICC one. That was a new one for me. I never really noticed that not one of those. I'll have to look at that.
Yep.
But loud and clear on both Watkins Mill as well as 117. And so we'll continue to work on that one. I'll let Executive Director Ports touch on the Gaithersburg Rockville signage on the ICC. The 270, 189. Tim may have a little bit more. I don't have much history on that one, but I can picture that because I've driven through there a few times, and frankly, we're out there with some initial project development, and then maybe we had some budget challenges, but he may be able to touch on that one. As for the 270 portion of the managed lane project. So about 2 weeks ago, and I hope she won't mind me saying this, I spent a few hours with Mayor Newton and we drove the whole corridor and we drove through some of the neighborhoods and we walked through some of the areas that could potentially have been impacted. And so we had a really, really good conversation about really how the community feels. And so, I felt like it was a good conversation and we're committed to continuing to work with the communities on that and continuing that collaboration. But it was a good discussion, and she expressed a lot of the same concerns that you're expressing. I'll touch a little bit on fare box recovery. We're dealing. We are, maybe Kevin can touch on Mark there, but we are on the WMATA side. We are experiencing some pretty significant fare box recovery hits as well as some revenue hits, and we're dealing with some of that on the WMATA side. Now, WMATA was very fortunate in the first level of CARES Act where they were able to receive, a significant influx of cash to help kind of deal with that. The federal delegation really helped us deal with some of the transit as well as the aviation issues in that first round of the CARES Act. But I can tell you that transit across the nation needs a second influx of some dollars to help keep those systems going. I'll put it back to WMATA is a little bit different than our system in Baltimore, but our system in Baltimore, I don't know what our citizens would have done without it in this pandemic. We were down maybe 50, 60% at the peak, where some other systems were down 95%. And so, you saw very quickly how important that transit system is in Baltimore to our core workforce and really that hospital workforce that was keeping the whole thing running through here. So, it's really critical. It's a lifeline for many of our citizens. I know we took that to heart when we started looking at some of the changes we would need to make. And we do things, we're really, as we're trying to look at adjustments that we may have need to make, we were able to walk back and find other ways to do it. But you're really focusing on where those zero car households are, where those riders that truly need us, that don't have other choices, because it's important for us that we prioritize them in our services more than anything else. Now, Mark is a little bit different because that's more of a commuter service, and we're following what's happening with the federal workforce very closely. But maybe Kevin can touch a little bit on the fare box recovery side. But I do think transit systems, that fare box recovery is growing thinner and thinner, and so those systems are going to require more help overall from us to keep moving.
Yeah, I think Secretary Slater hit a lot of it. I'll just note, so, I don't have the numbers in front of me on fare box recovery, but Senator, your guess is as good as mine. My guess is it's in the single digits, right? It's pretty low. So regarding fares, your question about fares and any impact there. So, our MARC and commuter bus fares are regulated by state law. And so MARC and commuter bus fares go up, are regulated to go up $1 every 5 years. And so that was supposed to happen actually just a few months ago on July 1st. And as a result of COVID and the pandemic, and under the governor's emergency declaration, we were able to postpone that. So when the emergency declaration is lifted, we will have to start taking steps to do that. But those fares and any kind of dramatic increases are currently protected under state law.
And the mowing and trimming?
Absolutely. Tim may want to touch on that, but that's a direct result of two things. One is in the heat of the pandemic situation, we had to switch our teams to like A and B teams because we couldn't have crews, large crews that were one in trucks together but working together. So we split them up, and that has created a little bit of a backlog in some of our maintenance activities. But to the budget side, so we're really going to have to focus those mowing and vegetation work specifically where they have safety at intersections and signage and those types of things. But I will caution that in those other areas, maybe down corridors where we don't have the overall safety concerns, the grass might get a little bit high and the vegetation might get a little thick with this budget.
If I can just say two things in response to what you all said. First off, I'm not holding my breath waiting on the next federal package coming down anytime soon. So it's easy to say they'll pay for it. But if that doesn't happen, I think we need a backup plan to make sure that WMATA and MARC are functioning and affordable. Is it possible if there's an address or something that you all can give us where we can note not just high grass, but truly safety measures where important signs are being obscured, where we and anyone watching can send information, photos, or areas of concern? That would be helpful.
Absolutely. We'll follow up and make sure you have the right contact, so I'll start with Erica Rigby as our district engineer down there, but we have a team, it's going to come back to the local shops and the men and women that are running those shops, and they're great. So, that's an important part for us. So sometimes we won't see it. And so if we can get that feedback, it can help us.
Perfect. And then Tim, if you can circle back on 117 and 189, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Secretary, members of your staff. Thank you very much for coming to us virtually, as you always do in real life in ordinary times. Let me start by thanking you for acknowledging the contribution, my dear friend, our dear friend, Kim Lamphere. I don't know if you know this, but it's come to my attention that her husband passed away a couple of days ago. and it's a great shock to all of us. Both of them were tremendous advocates for bicyclists and for multimodal transportation. And so our heart goes out to all of to all the members of their family, and we're still trying to piece together all the information behind this. But again, Mr. Secretary, thank you for acknowledging Kim and the bike program that's been made in her name, something that she's advocated for. I'd like to basically take my time not specifically discussing District 17 and its needs. I'd like to go up to 40,000 feet and talk globally about the transportation issues. As chairman of the Environment and Transportation Committee, as you know, many of these issues are before me, and I want to use this forum to really talk about some major challenges that I think we're going to be facing as a Maryland community with respect to transportation. And so, first of all, I have the greatest confidence in you, Mr. Secretary, and your team. I think that you are a marked improvement over your predecessor. And I think it is clear that the Purple Line P3 can only logically be described as a financial catastrophe. Before I was elected to public office many years ago, some of my colleagues know this, I was a contract negotiator and a contract administrator for various government contracting firms. And I have to tell you, I don't know if the primary defect in the P3 for the Purple Line was in the contract negotiation or if it was in the administration, but I do know this. I would have been fired if I had perpetrated that against a company that I worked for. Now, again, I don't blame you for this, but I think that this gives us an opportunity to really judge a P3 with respect to I-270 or Beltway being fully informed by the catastrophe that we have on our hand. We have enormous budgetary deficits that, frankly, I have no idea how we would pay for. I look forward to working with you on this, but you don't have an enviable task. And so, as much respect and confidence as I have in you, I don't know if even you can solve this problem. Now, a lot of these concerns about the environmental and financial impacts of the I-270 Beltway P3 were voiced by my committee and by the House of Delegates in 4 bills that we passed over the course of 2 years. Now, for the record, I have to say this, the Senate of Maryland didn't pass or vote on any of those bills. They chose to remain at the sidelines when it comes to regulating the finances and the environmental impact of this project. Well, okay, that's the way it goes. It takes 2 to tango in a bicameral legislative system. We're going to have to rely upon you and on the Board of Public Works to defend the interests of the taxpayers and the citizens of the state of Maryland. As a former contracting officer and a contract administrator, I think my bias would be to be in favor of a less expensive, more practical solution. I still do not understand why reversible tolled lanes isn't a good solution. I still don't understand why the P3 project has to be as large as the proposed price that's been put before us. In the end, I think that as Marylanders, as taxpayers, we are going to have to bear the burden of making a proper decision on this. I'm confident that you and your staff will make the correct decision. I have to say your predecessors haven't. And I think it's important for us to put that on the table now, because to be blunt, if nobody does that, if nobody says what has to be said at this juncture, I'm very afraid of the ultimate financial consequence for the taxpayers of the state of Maryland. I think one of the things that you and I, my colleagues in the Democratic Party, and even Governor Hogan share is a concern about the impact upon taxpayers in our state. And I'm very concerned that we're going to have a cubed version of the Purple Line P3 foisted upon us because we haven't done the things that contracting officers typically do in the private sector. And so I have to say, though, if anybody can figure it out, you're the guy to do that. I have a lot of confidence in you. I have a lot of confidence in the team that you have right now. But I do want some insurance. I want it. My constituents want it. I think the taxpayers of Maryland need that, because absent a very hard-edged look at the numbers of this project, we are in store for another catastrophic failure, and we can't afford two of them. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much. Let me first say I try really hard to not kind of second guess, my predecessor's decisions. I don't know what was, he may have had factors that I may not have known about. So
That's not your job. That's my job.
I try really hard to kind of, he made those decisions, and he may have had factors that I'm not aware of, and we may not have been aware of, when he made those. So I try really hard not to do that. And I try really hard to look forward. And so I can tell you that, I've been living and breathing the Purple Line probably over the last 6 months. And so, I've been spending a lot of time not only in the negotiations and in the issues that we're seeing, but also kind of working back somewhat forensically to understand from the beginning, how we got there. And so, I believe that there's a lot of lessons learned there that I would love to kind of sit down and talk through with you at some point and kind of work through that, because I think there are some things that we're learning every day with the issues and the challenges that we're seeing on the Purple Line, and it comes down to risks and who's taking risks and who's best equipped to take risks, and kind of where they are and how they're pushed down and how they're applied and how the contracts are written and those types of things. And so, I think you look at the Purple Line in particular, where, the real challenge for us was an element in the contract between the concessionaire and the contractor that we weren't a party to. So, you're learning a lot of those things that in any P3, I know in any P3 that I'm involved in are going to be on the forefront of my mind as I go into the next one, because we certainly don't want to we certainly don't want to encounter the same types of challenges again, both financially, but also from a project delivery standpoint. That being said, I also want to make sure that we don't get to a point that we take one project like the Purple Line and take P3s away from the government as a tool in the toolbox, because I think they do work in some areas. We've had some very successful ones. I think one of the most successful one we have is down at the Port of Baltimore with Ports America Chesapeake. It's really been a tremendous partnership for us. And so, I think what I'd like to do is figure out, one, my focus is getting through these Purple Line issues and getting those things where they need to be. But two is forensically looking at those and how we can look forward as a department. But I would welcome your collaboration on that as well.
Well, I appreciate that. And I especially want to amplify the comments that the chairman of the Montgomery County House delegation made with respect to Meridian. I don't know that I would be so willing to trust them as a partner. But look, here's the thing. As the guardians of the taxpayers' money, and that's what you and I and all of us here are, that's our first mission, to guard the money of the taxpayers of the state of Maryland. I think it's important for us to perhaps take some lessons from the private sector to be biased in favor of less expensive ideas rather than more expensive ideas. I think it's incumbent upon us to behave. I'm not a person who ordinarily touts the applications of the private sector and the government sector. I don't usually do that, but I think this is one of those few instances where it's appropriate. And I do look forward to working with you on that. And you're right about the Port of Baltimore. I think the private contracts that we've entered into in those instances have worked very, very well. But I also think that in the Port of Baltimore, we have an entire group of people who quite literally live, breathe, and eat the Port of Baltimore 24/7, 365 to a degree that neither you nor I would. And so we have a great advantage there. And so Again, I want to thank you for being here and for speaking to us. I look forward to working with you. Although the legislature won't be involved because the Senate won't pass any of our bills, I do look forward to working with you, and I do look forward to being able to find solutions that work for the taxpayers of the state of Maryland, because at the end of the day, both you and I and Larry Hogan can admit that that's our primary responsibility.
Good evening, everyone. Well, my colleagues from District 17 have been fairly thorough in addressing issues of concern to our constituents, but I did just want to briefly raise two safety issues. Firstly, in regards to pedestrian safety, a thank you for some of the improvements that were done on Route 355 in the vicinity of Rockville Town Center and the Metro in terms of adding pedestrian leading intervals and the automatic pedestrian walk signals. That's been a concern for our community for a while. And as somebody who walks through that area personally, I'm appreciative of those improvements. I'm curious though, what is the department's philosophy at this point with the new context-driven planning that was rolled out last year with those kind of pedestrian improvements? Are those going to be done and worked in proactively, or are those kind of improvements just being planned as new projects come up?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. That's a great question. So, when we look at how we apply these, they're applied in a couple of different ways, and certainly I would welcome Tim adding some comments to this as well. But they're applied in a couple of different ways. So those context-driven, they start with the land use, they start with the communities and what we're trying to do there, instead of starting with the roadway. And so it's really important that when we have new projects and our engineers are trying to design solutions, that they're really having a full understanding of what the community is, so that they can know what tools to use in the toolbox. So we don't use suburban tools in an urban environment. That just doesn't work from a safety perspective. But at the same time, we have tremendous needs across the state where we could apply these. And so I would argue that most of our arterials, our urban arterials, especially around the capital region, need to be completely rethought in terms of what they look like in the design and planning and the implementation and construction. But I do think that will take time. And so, we have these big projects that we could do over the years, but I think we can really make progress where, let's say, for instance, high visibility crosswalks. I think high visibility crosswalks are a huge benefit for very little investment. And so, as you're going out there and we're resurfacing a roadway and we're replacing crosswalks, let's make sure we do it with high visibility crosswalks. And so there's leading pedestrian intervals as we're upgrading signal systems and those types of infrastructure. I think it's important that we're looking at that context driven and making sure we're not just putting the same stuff back out there, that we're making improvements as we can. So I think there are improvements that we can make using those context driven guidelines with our everyday work, as well as with larger capital projects, because I think the larger capital project approach would just take too much time, as we're kind of waiting for these things. And I think, look at our roadways, it used to be every 7 to 9 years, we'd somewhat be out there kind of milling a roadway down and resurfacing it. There's so many opportunities with that. So you think about 7 or 9 years, you mill a roadway down and you resurface it. When you resurface it, you can restripe it. You can add a bike lane. You can look for opportunities to change the geometry and calm the traffic. You can add those high visibility crosswalks. You can do some things, because it really is about not only providing better infrastructure for our cyclists and our pedestrians, but it's about calming that traffic down so that they have a safer environment and a safer space at the same time. So it's really about how we're using it at every turn and every opportunity, whether it's large capital or whether it's just a small system reservation project. But Tim, anything you want to add to that?
Yes. So I guess two things. One is that's really more of a cultural change for State Highway is starting with the planning process. The planners as well as the engineers are thinking through that lens of the context. And what's been kind of cool is I've been looking at a set of plans and they'll actually have the context zone on there. So that's how they're thinking about it now. So it's being baked into it. But we can't wait for those capital projects to come through, because sometimes those take a couple years to deliver. But like I mentioned before, we've done 100 different improvements through Montgomery County alone over the last 18 months. And a lot of those are just been proactively doing it. We have a pedestrian safety action plan where we're using data, making data-driven decisions on where we feel like we have those concerns, and we can be able to push those out. So it's really a combination of our district operations staff addressing concerns as we see it being hotspots on our data, but also part of our overall culture and our process as we are building those projects for the future that very much look through that lens of the context guide.
Thank you both for that. I also just wanted to lift up the remarks of Delegate Fraser Hidalgo from earlier about move over and fatalities on roadways. I appreciate Administrator Smith's remarks on that earlier as well. I just, hope that as your education campaigns and other efforts go forward on that, that you'll keep in mind that it's not just police officers and other workers who are tragically killed in roadways on the shoulders on the highways, that there are civilians where it happens to as well. We've had a number of unfortunate fatalities on I-270 in recent years in our district. And so I hope that will be part of the safety plans there as well. Thank you.
Agreed completely.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary and the District 17 team. I know that many of the people who are presenting tonight and delegates and senators who are presenting are representing their team and asking questions on behalf of their team, like Lily Chi, who's in District 15. And I know Delegate Jim Gilchrist is also on, and his team did a great job asking questions. And with that, I'll turn it to the District 18 team, starting out with Senator Jeff Waldstreicher, and I know Emily Shetty and Jared Solomon now on as well, but Senator Waldstreicher, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and all of our staff for joining us here on today's Zoom. I reiterate a lot of the compliments as well as the concerns that we've heard so far this evening. As you know, Mr. Secretary, in our district, we have 2 state highways that really are the spine of our legislative district, Georgia Avenue and Connecticut Avenue. And then our district is bordered on our west with District 16 and bisected by Wisconsin Avenue, Rockville Pike. And these roads really affect the day-to-day life of our district. And then, of course, the roads that connect them, the Beltway and East-West Highway. With such an extensive presence of state highway in our district, it takes all 4 of us working together. And so I'm so proud to serve with Delegate Al Carr, Delegate Emily Shetty, Delegate Jared Solomon. We work together closely as a team. Our staffs meet daily, and I know you've worked well with our staff and with us, and I thank you for that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Delegate Al Carr.
Thank you, Senator Waldstreicher. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and your entire staff. And just to build on what Senator Waldstreicher said, the folks we work with most closely are the State Highway Administration District 3, and I think I speak for all of us in just expressing our appreciation, formerly under Andre's leadership and now under Erica, that entire team. You are all very responsive to our constituents, very professional, and all of our constituents greatly appreciate that, so do we. Regarding State Highway, one question I had was about the project for Jones Bridge Road widening. This was the BRAC project. It's been in the CTP for at least since 2013. And I think that it was sort of being staggered with the Purple Line work. And I wondered, now that the Purple Line work has been suspended. So one question is, what's the timing going to be for that Jones Bridge Road BRAC widening work? Second question would be about ADA sidewalk retrofits, really countywide and statewide. I know even before the pandemic, that work had sort of slowed from what had been done in years past. If you look at the attainment report, so just wondered sort of what is the thought of the priority of catching up to some of that backlog of bringing our sidewalks along our state roads up to ADA compliance. And I know your team's doing a lot of great stuff on corridor studies. We really appreciate that. And then also helping us address some flooding issues where the big roads go through some of our older neighborhoods and our storms being more frequent. So we really want to stress the importance of that. In terms of the Maryland Transit Administration, just a question I had was if it had ever been resolved of the payment system. Is the Purple Line going to use the same payment system as Metro and Ride-On, or is that something that still has not been determined? And then finally, for the MDTA, thank you for cutting the late fees down to $25. Thanks for streaming your meetings. I know that the transition to the new vendor for the back office has been delayed. But I know a lot of Montgomery County residents are impacted by these late fees from citations and video tolls in the ICC. I wondered if you knew when the court hearings were going to resume for those contested ICC video toll cases. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I might have some folks kind of add some things on, but let me touch on them just briefly. I have to follow up with you on the Jones Bridge. I've been so focused on the Purple Line itself. Unless Administrator Smith has some backup, I can kind of follow up with where that Jones Bridge work is. On the ADA retrofit side, I think, I hear you loud and clear. There are two issues on our sidewalk program today. One is the ADA retrofit, but also, the areas where we need sidewalk but don't have sidewalk. And so, we're trying to figure out what the right asset management approach to that and get that sustainable investment level back into the program. We certainly, I recognize that. I know, especially in your district, you've been dealing with a fair amount of flooding issues, and I know we'll continue to work with those. We have some of those statewide, but you seem to have a bunch of them in your district, so we'll continue to work on those. The WMATA issue has been solved, so the Purple Line will be on the WMATA same kind of fare box system. So we've worked that out, and that's going to continue to be on track. And I know. I keep my WMATA board members up to date on everything that's happening on the Purple Line so that we can continue to keep that in line. And then on the ICC, I'll see if Executive Director Jim Ports has anything to add on that. I know we've had some, I'm a little hesitant to unleash him here because I know we've had some real challenges with the vendor transition, and I know he's pretty frustrated with it, but he may have something he wants to add there.
Sure. Thanks, Delegate. First of all, I want to thank you for recognizing we were ready for the videoing of our meeting. I promised you that we would be, and we were, as you know. So thank you for recognizing that. On the $25 fee, going from $50 to $25, as you may know, we did pause the notice of full dues starting back in March 17th. When the pandemic hit. And so even though some of those tolls would have had a $50 civil penalty, we are making sure that all the notices of toll dues going out now, started today, will only have a $25 civil penalty. We reduced it for everyone, backdated it, if you will. And so we're cooperating in that front. The vendor issue, you are correct. It's funny, a lot of times the private sector talks about bureaucracy and bureaucrats and state employees, but often we depend on the private sector to do their part. We contract with them to get our systems up and running. And sometimes they fail us. And right now I'm having, I shouldn't even say weekly meetings because they're more weekly meetings with the vendor, our contractors, our consultants that we have on our end to push this thing forward. I had been demanding from our private sector vendor that, or I should say I've been mentioning that he has the wrong team here, and that they didn't seem to be able to get the job done. And I have been demanding that they bring a new team in, and they just did that about 8 or 9 days ago. So hopefully with this new team, we can turn this thing around, and I'm really looking forward to getting it up and running. We'll keep it.
Thanks. And do you know when those court dates are going to resume for the backlog?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I had that written down. I didn't even know. Unfortunately, as you know, the courts have been shut down for almost 7 months, and the backlog of all of their cases. I'm sure that there are many cases like for rent, and and people paying, paying for their rental payments and stuff like that. I'm sure those are going to be way ahead of us. We have not heard yet from the court system where we are in that pecking order, but I believe that we're going to be behind many of those other cases, unfortunately. But that's, that's not under our control. As you know, that is the court's control. So they determine their schedule. But we'll be working with them.
Thank you.
And Greg, this is Tim. Just to chime in about the 185 BRAC project, we actually we opened bids on that in August, and we're hoping to have a notice to proceed between now and the end of the year.
Great.
Hi, thank you all so much for coming to do this with us virtually this year, Mr. Secretary. I want to echo the thanks to your team for all of their responsiveness to our constituent service request, participation in multiple town halls and events, and just general responsiveness to questions and queries that we've had. They have all been really terrific to work with.
Great.
I just have three sort of sets of questions for your team, Mr. Secretary. So the first is, I'm wondering if you can please share a little bit more information about the plans for improvements on Connecticut Avenue northbound from 495 to Knowles Avenue. Specifically, could you share what improvements are going to be made at the intersection of Saul Road and Connecticut Avenue, where there have been a number of crashes in recent years, including a near fatality just 1 year ago this month. And, if you can share a little bit more about specifically when we can anticipate construction improvements to begin that would include a protected left turn light at that intersection, that would be really helpful. The second set of questions I have are around Georgia Avenue and Arcola. So just last month, there was an ambulance that was involved in a pretty bad collision there, and there has been an increase in pedestrian traffic in that area due to the recent opening of a new county facility there. That's a pretty great facility in our community. So there has been a lot of interest from members of the community in additional safety measures, pedestrian safety measures in that particular intersection. So I'm wondering if we can please, make sure that SHA is engaged with the county to put together a plan for how to improve pedestrian safety at that intersection. And if you already are, if you can share a little bit about what the plans are, that would be great. And the third question I have is related to the Wheaton CBD. So we really appreciate the work that's been done to date in the Wheaton CBD, and we ask that SHA continue to press forward on the planned improvements and hasten progress on the Price Street Signal and Georgia Avenue median barrier in conjunction with our County Department of Transportation. We're also asking that SHA do a sidewalk assessment on Georgia, University, and Bears Mill and make improvements to safety and accessibility along with signal button accessibility. And I know this is a little bit more of a county enforcement issue, but to the extent that you can collaborate with them, there is a lot of interest in additional automated speed enforcement along those corridors on Georgia, University, and Bears Mill. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We're happy to work with you on all of those. I know Chris Conklin and I in the county work pretty closely together on a lot of those issues and continue to work together on Wheaton. What I'd like to do is maybe have Erica Rigby from our district office kind of follow up with your office and see if there's an opportunity to kind of walk through all the plans that we have in those areas and talk through. I really like to make sure as we're developing those things and as we're working through those things that we're not missing a perspective that we should have, from the community that's really in there that you may be more in tune with than we are. And so if we're missing, I'm thinking specifically about Arcola. And we may have been missing something. So I want to make sure that we're really entrenched in that one. But I'll have Erica follow up with you. I think she's on the call, but we can follow up with you and kind of walk through those things and kind of do that together.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, administrators and Mr. Secretary. It's good to see you in this new role. I wish we were meeting in person. This feels normal but abnormal at the same time. I had a couple of things that I wanted to touch on, both local and sort of writ large on some of the bigger issues that we've touched on already. And I do just want to say, echo I think what you've heard from a lot of my colleagues in District 18 and across our county. The District 3 folks have been fantastic to work on. Even just yesterday we got some good news on some work that we're doing on East West Highway and Grub Road on a no turn on red sign, and I know we're waiting on a bunch of other analyses that are still being worked on. And we just appreciate, particularly Derek and Eric's accessibility and just willingness to work with us on so many different issues across our community. And I do want to echo, I think, both our county executives' comments and some of the other folks around Montgomery Hills. And I know, you and I have worked on that, and Administrator Smith, I appreciate, your willingness to get on, regular calls with our D18 team and our District 20 team, to work collectively on that. And so I really hope that we can restore the funding. And, as we've talked about, get ready for, fingers crossed, the potential of maybe some federal stimulus dollars that could come in around infrastructure. And we want to make sure that that project is ready to go. On some of the, the concerns and areas of disappointments, I think, the Beltway 490, the Beltway 270 piece has been touched on, quite a bit, but I did just want to mention, the WSSC water pipe issue. And I think the unanswered question around the cost, is particularly troublesome. We were inundated with communications from our constituents who are really worried that they're going to see just a tremendous increase in their potentially in their water bills to cover that infrastructure cost. Our delegation chair in his other role, Delegate Corman has been really on point in highlighting the potential reduction in congestion from telecommuting. Which wasn't really touched on in the DEIS. And then the last piece for our district in particular is just the tremendous impact that a potential on and off ramp could have on Connecticut Avenue. And you and I and your team have had, long conversations about, a lot of the failed intersections on that section of the road and the idea that Connecticut Avenue could, handle just a tremendous additional capacity in the future. Coming off the Beltway is just still one of the big unanswered pieces. And then the other area that I just wanted to touch on is the MARC system. I was really disappointed. Our team worked closely with your folks on a bill that was actually the last bill that passed in session. And obviously, this was the governor's decision to veto it, but I was just really disappointed in that veto for what would have been, I think, a small amount of money for investments, not only in run-through service, in our region, but benefits to the Baltimore region, to the Hartford County region with that last gap. I think about the investments that we're not going to spend in rail, in the MARC system, when I see in the CTP that there's $7.5 million slated for planning for the maglev, which is running in the upwards of $30 to $40 million already. And we have actually no long-term expansion plans in the CTP for MARC. All the while Virginia has literally made a commitment to invest, billions of dollars in their rail expansion that they're continually committed to. So I just want to echo the comments of my colleagues who have mentioned, I know we seem to be sort of selectively applying the change that COVID has brought in our transportation world to, things like public transit and rail systems, but we are not doing anything. We're not using that same lens to look at the Beltway 270 project when we know that commuting patterns have changed dramatically with telecommuting. So I did have just a couple of specific questions. My colleague Delegate Shetty mentioned Veers Mill and that corridor, and we've had a lot of concern raised from our constituents around the safety improvements that have been, sort of laid out, but have not yet been implemented. So, would love to work with the District 3 team on that. There's specifically a signal at Norris Avenue and Veers Mill that we're hoping we can get expedited. And our local police department did a speed study that showed there were upwards of, cars traveling upwards of 90 miles per hour. So we would love to talk to you about some enforcement strategies there and potentially speed limit reductions. I know your team has just been phenomenal to work with on the Shared Streets program that have been wildly successful in all parts of the county. And I know there's still a number of outstanding roads that are on that list. Hopefully, we won't be with dealing with COVID for forever, but at least in the near future, particularly in the Wheaton area on University Avenue, I think there's some abilities there to help our small businesses that are trying to stay afloat. And then I would say, the other question, and it's sort of been touched on by a couple of different of my colleagues, but the pedestrian safety improvements that we're talking about in a lot of these areas cost a lot of money. And I guess I would just sort of ask in the longer term to think creatively and to work with us in the legislature. How can we carve out pots of money? What other changes could we make, to be able to put real dollars into these pedestrian safety improvements and sidewalk improvements that cost a lot of money. And I think you and I have talked about this for a long time. And then lastly, I would ask, your team and the team at MTA to really commit to work with the Greater Washington Partnership and their regional rail vision. I'm lucky enough to be on that committee, and they've really brought together, business policymakers and community leaders from across DC, Virginia, and Maryland to really look at what a regional rail system could look like. And I think there's going to be some exciting ideas coming out of that from some of the, the brightest minds in our region on transportation, and would just ask that your team, commits to being a part of that and engaging and hopefully, implementing some of the recommendations that come out of that report.
Absolutely. Let me touch on that part first. So Joe and I talk quite frequently. So the Greater Washington Partnership. So we're committed to working with them. We just worked with them. The Greenway stuff that just came out, and some, they have a number of really, really good efforts. And so, myself and Virginia, as well as the district, we've been working pretty closely with them and making sure that everyone's at the table and everybody has a voice and everybody's engaged in this. So, certainly we are focused on that one as well. I'm going to touch on a few of these issues, and I'm always trying to take some notes to make sure I don't miss anything. But let me start on the WSSC piece. I understand that concern. I just want to kind of alleviate some of that a little bit. We're just so early. We don't have a good understanding of kind of what that is, but we've been working with. So Carla and I met and established a working group where our teams and their teams are really working together to really have an understanding and then figure out ways that we can avoid any impacts. That's kind of the first priority, but really kind of look for ways there. But we're working together, and then really we just don't have an understanding, and anything that's out there that says we do, I would argue is very premature right now, and so. We're continuing to work with them. The MagLab dollars that you referenced, I believe they're federal dollars and private sector dollars, because we don't have, that's a private sector project, but certainly. And then, I really do want to touch on some of the COVID impacts, because, we are looking at that across the board. It's touching everything. And so, there's so many different data sources. So there was a great, TPB did a great survey on teleworking that, unfortunately didn't have a great response rate, but it also had some really good data in it from the businesses that did respond, and really trying to understand kind of what their vision is kind of forward teleworking, where, I think just pulling out a few pieces, like 92% said that some measure of telework would stay even after the pandemic, so, those types of things. The businesses that were set up for telework before pandemic were the ones that really excelled. But I think what this pandemic has done is some of the ones that weren't set up for telework has really kind of been forced into it, and they're showing that it does work in some instances. The other piece that's interesting from a travel perspective is the staggering of shifts. Staggering of shifts to have smaller workforces in the workplace at one time has a really interesting effect on travel, because you don't have that kind of measured peak at that morning and evening where everybody's kind of going in the morning and evening. But the piece that I think we don't have a solid understanding of at this point is where that telework is going to come from. And so where so for instance, I'll give you WMATA, for instance. WMATA's been doing a lot of outreach to their customers and trying to understand kind of when their customers are going to come back and when that's going to happen. And one of the things that they're finding is it really has a lot to do with a vaccine. And so, there's a lot of folks where, like 53% of WMATA, based on the surveys, really feel like they need that vaccine before they're ready to come back. So I think there's so many health elements to this. So I think where the unknown is on the teleworking side is we do think we're going to have a higher instance of teleworking that's coming out of this pandemic. But where the unknown is whether that's going to come from drivers that are on the roadway or folks that are using some of our transit or rail services. And we have to kind of work through that and understanding what their needs are and their comfort levels as we kind of lay those things out. So I think there's just a lot of unknowns right now. And some of the projects, I just will stress that they're not only for dealing with some of the issues today, but they're looking at kind of where issues could grow and the growth and kind of set us up in a better way for the future. But I'd be happy to keep working with you on all those issues.
Thank you. And I also just want to, I know we sent you our District 18 priorities around the purple line, but Matt has been really great to work with and appreciate the engagement. And I know we're working on setting up some additional walkthroughs, but just appreciate both Kevin and Matt's commitment and engagement with the town of Chevy Chase and some of our other local communities that are really impacted by it. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And actually that letter was really helpful. It helps us kind of guide where we're doing some things and get that engagement going.
Great. Thank you, District 18. Before we turn to our final legislative district of the night, I just want to mention that Delegate Stewart from District 19 is here, although is not speaking. Delegate Crutchfield, I believe, was on earlier, and Delegate Lopez from District 39 had to depart early. But now I'll turn it over to the District 20 team, which I believe with us is Delegate Wilkins, Delegate Moon, and Delegate Charcutia. District 20.
Great, thank you. I think that is Delegate Wilkins there? I think she was going to go first talking about the purple line. If she's not, I can speak, but we're gonna, there she is. Hey.
There we are. Good evening, everyone. And thank you so much for engaging with us tonight and for your responses to all of the questions. We just wanted to raise again, I think you all are well aware of the impact of the purple line in our district. There are a number of stops and the result of the current halt is just very impactful for our community that has really been impacted by the construction. We have constituents who have a lot of questions around what is going on. The need for direct communication with them is so critical, and the need to really see the project through and have that commitment to the full completion of the project is so critical for the residents in our district. So we really wanted to lift that up and just ask again for that commitment and any timeline, additional details that our constituents can look forward to in terms of that completion. And I also wanted to flag, I think you all are aware of the work that the District 20 team, Senator Smith, Delegate Moon, Delegate Charcutia, and I have done around businesses related to the purple line that have been impacted by the construction, and wanted to hear from you all around any mitigation, any outreach and support, given that the Purple Line partners were working with those businesses around making sure that they would survive doing construction, and now the sudden pause in the work. And also to reiterate for all of you that we have $2 million sitting in the budget that the Maryland General Assembly allocated for those businesses impacted. And I want to understand in terms of Governor Hogan and the administration, why those funds have not been spent for the businesses that have been impacted, several shut down due to the Purple Line construction, and that those funds to help those businesses are just sitting there in the budget unspent with no plan in sight for these businesses. So thank you again, and we look forward to continuing our work with you all.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Delegate Wilkins. Let me first going to touch on the Purple Line and make my commitment again that we are focused on not only getting this project completed as quickly as we possibly can, but also in the process collaborating with the communities and everyone along the way, and continuing to answer many questions that a lot of the communities have right now, especially in the transition. I know Matt and Kevin and I have talked a lot about how we can increase those outreach efforts during the transition period, especially where we have a number of residents that just have questions. And so some of them have emailed me directly, and we were working with kind of getting those responses. I know Matt has hosted some of them up and down the corridor, and he's going to continue to kind of work with them as well. But but I would welcome any input on ways that you think we can be most effective in making sure we're getting that communication going. The business side is another one. We've been so focused on kind of the resident piece that, I know my efforts, and Matt may have some extra information on that one, but I know my efforts. I've been talking to some of the larger kind of businesses and developers along there to kind of work with them so that we make sure that our transition is very smooth, but also we're not impacting their ability to be successful as a business or a developer, and working through that and have that commitment. But you have my 200% commitment that we're going to get this thing done. We're going to get it done collaboratively, and we're going to work together, and we're going to communicate. So, that's the expectation that we've laid out. I'll have to follow up with you on the outreach dollars and see where that sits today in our program. But I'm happy to kind of follow up with you and see where that sits and see if there are some opportunities there.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I'll go next. So let me start by thanking you, Secretary Slater, and your whole team. It's always a pleasure to work with all of you. And I've appreciate the work that you've done, especially in these challenging times. I also want to thank Matt and the Purple Line folks who I'll just take this opportunity, since I know thousands of our constituents are watching tonight, to mention that we are working with them, and we do have a town hall, an online town hall next Thursday night. We just announced it today. We just got the pieces together. So folks can reach out to any of the D20 offices for more information about that. But we're looking forward to getting some questions answered there as well. There's two things I wanted to highlight. I did want to just reiterate how disappointed I was to see that the Georgia Ave Montgomery Hills project is not funded at all. And I think, as you know, and as Tim knows, we have been working with SHA and MDOT to just look at any kind of creative ways. We've looked at ways to break the project down. We've looked at ways to make some kind of project on progress on what is an extraordinarily dangerous. It has incredible impacts on business development, but also just on safety for pedestrians and bikers, on safety for the for folks in the vehicles, for people using transit, and just everyone all the way around. And it had been our hope that we could really tee it up to be sort of shovel ready for federal money coming. As you know, we've worked with you to try to find federal money. And it seems like there's got to be something that can be done so we keep the ball moving on that. And I don't know if you want to speak to that, but it's kind of shocking that there's absolutely nothing that we can do. There's no money, there's no federal, there's just really nothing when that project has been in the works for, 35 years now.
No, I agree with you completely. And that particular cut was a really painful one. And so I think I'll just reiterate that project, you and I have talked about that project many times. We've met on it many times. Mm-hmm. It's right on the top of the list for me. And so if we have some flexibility, that's a project that I would love to see advance, and that'll continue to be a priority for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's on the top of the list for the county too. So not just for the District 20, District 18, but also for the county. The second thing I just want to mention, and it's been mentioned by several people tonight, and I appreciate that, is kind of the broader pedestrian bike safety issues. And I think that we've seen certainly some shift in with your leadership, Secretary, and leadership within SHA. We have seen some shift in prioritizing sort of multimodal transportation, but it's been very slow in terms of really making its way down to the reality of planning. And while I would say the individuals that we have an opportunity to work with in the District 3 are just fantastic and personally very responsive and very cooperative, the reality of what it takes to get a sidewalk put in, or even what seems like simple things like a crosswalk, which is what I spoke about last year when I was here asking if I could just go out and paint them myself. Getting a crosswalk put in, getting a lead pedestrian interval, the amount of time, I don't know if it's the study, even things that have a relatively low cost, the number of times we have to ask about them. I have my running list, and it's just every quarter when we have our meetings, I'm asking often about the same things over and over again. This year we were trying to get all of the, frankly, as far as I'm concerned, every crosswalk, every light ought to be auto pedestrian recall. I'm not sure why anyone needs to hit a beg button on any crosswalk. But certainly in the well-traversed areas in all the business districts. And it was a considerable amount of effort, in COVID, when early on, when, we were trying to just get them so that people weren't touching them. Through COVID, it just was considerable effort to get all that done. But even on some design projects, I've been surprised to see design projects and responses to issues come out in ways that make things more difficult for pedestrians, that make things, removal of bus stops or removal of where pedestrians are currently crossing without a crosswalk, and instead of adding a crosswalk, an addition of a barrier to sort of quote unquote discourage mid-block crossing. But then what that's doing is it's adding another half mile that people who need to get from their homes to a bus stop have to walk. And that sort of is reflective, I think, of the old way of thinking. And I still see that coming in. So I don't want to go through tonight. It's late, and I know you all have been listening very carefully, and I'm grateful to so much of this. But I would just say that overall, I know where you're trying to take the department. I'm grateful, and I hope we can move there faster, and I hope we can support you to move there faster, because every time we hear about a pedestrian who is killed in our community, we have all failed. And there's just no reason, there's no excuse. We know what the technology is that we need. We know what the design stuff is that we need. And we've got to put it into place. We can't lose pedestrians and bikers. We can't lose people in their cars either. But we just it's devastating, and it's preventable. And we've got to be accountable to our communities in that way.
Thank you so much. I'll just kind of touch on a few, but I understand a lot of those frustrations and concerns, and I would just encourage you to keep working with us as we work with our team. And so, where myself and Tim and Erica and Andre, we can't be in every meeting in every instance, but raising those issues to us, we can certainly try and work through them, because culture changes take the longest to change. And so, but what we don't want to do is lose opportunities here or there where we could make an area safer. I think really on the traffic side, you mentioned crosswalks. A lot of times those decisions are kind of grounded back into advice we had gotten from an attorney somewhere on the liability side. So, I would encourage you to not be shy about challenging us on some of those decisions, and see if we can kind of work through some of those things, and our team might find a way, if we can find a way to do those things. And I think what that comes down to is, like, I'll take a crosswalk or a signal, for instance. If we put one of them in, but don't do the study to show the need or the engineering piece, and then something happens, we've been scarred over the years where, lawyers will come after us and kind of sue us. And the first thing they do is, where's the study that said that this should be here? And so I think there's just a generation of transportation folks that are kind of burned by that we have to kind of work through and really weave, in my mind, where I feel like we need to weave the human factors and the human elements back into the engineering aspects. And that was really where a lot of the context driven pieces were coming from. But I would just encourage you to keep working with us on those, and keep raising those issues, and keep challenging us if they start to come down, and we'll keep working with you on those to find the right solution.
I will.
Thank you, everyone. I think I'm bringing up the rear here for District 20 and maybe the county. So let me reiterate that the most immediately nerve-wracking piece for District 20 is likely right now is the unfinished state of the Purple Line and maintaining safe and accessible sites in the meantime. So I won't belabor that point. But to follow up on what my colleague Delegate Charkoudian was saying, your folks had indicated to us that major work like signalization and things like that was on hold with pandemic budgets and what have you. But I would suggest to you that while that's the case, these lightweight things like painting missing striping and things like that, crosswalks, I really hope you could find a way to keep those going. You would be shocked at how excited people get when the missing crosswalk is painted back in on their block. It's seen as a real, and again, as my colleague says we're talking about paint there. So with that general comment, also I'm excited to hear your vision support discussion. Be on the lookout for local legislation to try and give our county back some influence over those speed limits. And I hope with changing mindsets, you might see fit to support that. As past administrations have had different support for that. And the meat of my comments is for the entirety of the team. Again, Senator Smith, Delegate Wilkins, Delegate Charkoudian, and myself, we want to just renew our skepticism and opposition to aspects of this Beltway widening proposal. Again, I don't need to belabor the points made earlier this evening, but we would think that with the current traffic conditions and potential change in what those models might bear out, that it seems we can potentially improve traffic without these kinds of environmental impacts and right-of-way takings. We also continue to be concerned about perceptions of a rushed EIS process that appears to drive us towards the result of doing a highway widening instead of fully looking at the range of options over a length of time. And of course, the utilities concern that's emerged recently. And of course, with the Purple Line issues with the public-private partnership, this whole concept of where the risk might lie for overruns and things and possibility to get held up by private contractors is something we are keen to avoid. And with that, I will shut up. So thank you for hearing us out.
Thank you so much, Delegate Moon. I'll just say that I'm committed to working with you on all of those issues. And, you know, on the speed limit front, there's a lot of really interesting things that are happening on the safe speed approach versus the 85th percentile approach. And I think there's some interesting things to explore there, especially, you know, when you look at business districts very differently than you would look at a suburban roadway. You know, my 25-year plight in this department has always been about everything's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And so I think there's some opportunities to kind of work together on some of those things. And so I would continue to collaborate on those as well.
Great. Thank you, District 20. Mr. Secretary, on behalf of Chair Zucker, myself, and the entire delegation, thanks so much for to you and your team for joining us tonight. And I will say, although this is an important annual public meeting, what's great about the way you run the department is that it's really a 365-day-a-year conversation and dialogue, which we really appreciate. It's always been your personal style, but it's great to see it become the department style. So we really appreciate that. Just for my colleagues, a reminder, we're back on November 12th for the Joint Priorities hearing, aka Open Mic Night. And this meeting is available on our delegation YouTube page as a recording if anybody needs to go back and see anything or wants to share with their constituents. So thank you all again on behalf of Chair Zucker and myself. Have a great evening.
Thank you so much.